This meeting of the Margate Planning Board is called to order. Please rise for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Tom Collins. Clem Wozleski. Rich Patterson.
Here.
Mike Cristaldi.
Here.
Jim Galantino. Margaret Gubernalti.
Here.
Craig Palmisano.
Here.
Despina Hess. Remy Pelosi.
Here.
Joe DiGirolamo. Ron Gruppo.
Here.
Mike Richmond.
Here.
This meeting is being held in accordance with public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the two information sheets. I'd like to hear a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th.
I'll make that motion.
Mike?
I'll second.
Craig? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for approval of decisions and resolutions number 10, 2019, PMG Real Estate Developers, LLC, number 11, 2019, Christopher and Doris Pisani, number 12, 2019, Christopher and Mary Ann Beck, number 13, 2019, A.J. and J Associates 1, LLC. Hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mike?
Second.
Craig? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. First case is JJCC Longport LLC, 14 North Rumson Avenue, Block 219, Lot 10, in the S40 district to grant a minor subdivision and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon, would you be sworn in, please?
Mr. McLaren, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members, board chairman. My report is dated March 21st, 2019, in regard to application of JJCC Longport LLC, 14 North Rumson Avenue, which is within the S40 zone. Effective firm, elevation 9. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the city of Margate in order to subdivide one existing oversized lot into two lots of equal width, but the widths and areas do not meet the minimum required by ordinance. The subject property is located on the southwest corner of Winchester Avenue and North Rumson Avenue, and the zoning is governed by Schedule B1. The property contains a one-story brick single-family dwelling, which is non-flood compliant, constructed in 1948. The result of the subdivision would be a corner lot and an interior lot. No improvements are proposed at this time. You can see the zoning chart for S40 on the bottom of page 1, top of page 2 of my report. The documents reviewed, I'd like to point out the one important document is the minor subdivision review letter from Remington and Vernick, March 11, 2019, which the applicant will have to address. The variances required are as follows. Lot width for proposed lot 10.01, whereas the minimum lot width required for zone S40 is 50 feet, and 48 feet is proposed, a variance of 2 feet. Same thing for proposed lot 10.02, whereas the minimum lot width required is 50 feet and 48 feet is required, or 48 feet is proposed. Both of those are as per Schedule B1. The next two variances are equal for each lot, whereas the lot area, proposed lot 10.01, whereas the minimum lot area required for zone S40 is 4,000 square feet, and 3,840 square feet is proposed for each lot, so a variance of 160 square feet is required for both lots. So 4 variances are required to subdivide this lot as proposed. Waivers requested, they're listed in the engineer's report, which the applicant shall go over. Comments, the engineer's report, and any comment shall be included in any approval. The minimum lot width does not meet the required minimum, and variances are required. Same thing for lot area. The improvements will be required to be demolished to subdivide the lot and have it filed. No improvements are proposed, and no other bulk variances are being requested at this time. Prior to any development after the subdivision, a grading plan shall be required. Again, this is engineering heavy on this report, on this application. So at this point in time, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. McLaren, and members of the board. My name is Chris Valenson for JJCC Longport LLC. With respect to property at 14 North Rumson Avenue, identified in the tax map, Lot 10 and Block 219, I would ask that everybody just keep an open mind to hear this case. I know the general feeling about minor subdivisions. I can suggest to you that this minor subdivision is a subdivision that is absolutely consistent with what the founders of Margate had intended. We are simply putting 2 lots back on the tax map the way they were in 1914 and the way that the rest of the block and every other lot on this block is, along with the surrounding blocks. If you look at Mr. McLaren's report, Mr. McLaren also mentions that in terms of the lots, they are consistent with other lots on this block, and that the density is not creating any lots that were not originally anticipated. We can show you that in 1914, when this block was laid out, as a result of the angle of the parkway, it's interesting. The lot width of each lot on successive blocks changes by a foot or 2 feet, exactly on every single block because of the angle of the parkway. For instance, on this block, the lots were 48 feet. On the next block over, this board permitted a subdivision of the same exact lot, but just 1 block over. Now that lot, because the angle of the parkway, they were conforming, but it's the exact same subdivision. You'll see that there are no additional lots created, so density is not an issue. These are only C variances for 2 feet, 48 feet, 2 feet of lot width, which also calls into question a lot area variance. We think we're going to be able to show you that the variances, if granted, promote the general welfare by maintaining consistency, preserve light, air, and open space, prevent flood as a result of flood compliance from what's there now, and preserve appropriate population densities. I want to introduce John Barnhart, project planner and project engineer, to testify with respect to the subdivision. John, you licensed professional planner and licensed professional engineer?
Yes.
You've been before this board previously?
Let me swear him in. I just didn't know if he was ready yet. Well, John, whenever you're ready, just state your name and business address for the record.
With a microphone.
I just happened to have one.
Thank you.
She carries around everywhere.
John, you're a licensed professional planner and engineer. You need to be sworn in first before you answer the questions.
Yes.
Just state your
We
name
accept
and
this
business
qualification.
address.
John Barnhart, office address 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And Mr.
Thank you.
Patterson, the board will accept the qualifications?
Yes.
Planner and engineer?
Yes.
Thank you. John, you've had a chance to prepare the subdivision plan and analyze the zoning in this area?
We did not prepare the subdivision plan, but yes, we have done a full analysis of the subdivision plan, the surrounding neighborhood, the zoning. We've studied this lot quite extensively at this
Would you
point.
take the board then through your analysis of the zoning and the proposed subdivision?
Sure. So as Chris pointed out, we recognize that this board does not take subdivisions lightly. Density is always an issue, especially in an urban environment. But when we looked at this application, when we were asked to take a look at it and provide testimony, what we recognized, I believe, that this is a project that does make sense for this specific block. This is a specific case on a specific piece of property that has certain circumstances that surround it that we believe makes it an appropriate request that we're here for this evening. I'm going to start with Exhibit A1 that I've marked. This is the 1914 Mueller Atlas, and it shows the layout of the properties.
Well, John, what's Mueller Atlas? What is the significance?
It portrays it's a map of the city of Margate. It's essentially the tax records from the early 1900s.
Thanks.
But what it does is it lets you see how and why the lots were laid out the way that they are, and why the lots in this block ended up at 48 feet. So what I've done is I've taken a section of the parkway that starts at Nassau Avenue and goes to Union Avenue. And I could have continued it on because the pattern's consistent, but our property is kind of right central to that subsection of the parkway. And what you see is you have Winchester Avenue that obviously runs straight on this plan, and you can see the parkway has an angle to it.
Where you're running east to west?
I'd be running
Yes.
sort of, yes. What you see, I'm going to start at the top of the plan. The developers when the city decided to create the lots the way that they did, they developed a pattern to kind of average out a 50-foot lot, which is how your zoning has essentially continued in the majority of this area. But because of the angle of the parkway, they basically staggered it so that the densities within the blocks stayed the same. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to start up at Nassau Avenue. What you see is you've got 52-foot lots along that entire Nassau Avenue, which created a total of 20 lots in that block. As the parkway continues to angle, they keep jumping down in lot width and maintaining. So what I mean, they went from 52-foot lots up above Nassau to 50-foot lots, again, maintaining that 20-lot density in the block, down to 48-foot lots, maintaining that density. Once they got to a point where they couldn't maintain that density without creating lots, they were too far gone from the 50-foot requirement, they then jumped back up. So then they went to a density of 18 lots per block. 53-foot wide lots, 18 of them in that block between Pembroke and Quincy. 50-foot wide lots, 18 of them between Quincy and Rumson, and then getting to our block, 48-foot wide lots between Rumson and Sumner.
So by virtue of the angle of the parkway, what the planners did back then was to try to maintain 50-foot, as close to 50-foot as possible, or approximately 20 lots.
Correct, and they tried to maintain the same density within those blocks as those blocks got shorter as you go down the island. The next 3 blocks do the same thing. They jump down to 16 lots in the block. The first block between Sumner and Thurlow being 53-foot lots, the next block between Thurlow and Union being 50-foot lots, and the next block between Union and Vendome actually jumps to 47-foot lots in that block because of the way it lays out.
But every third block or so, it does jump below 50
That's correct.
to maintain the density, and this is and Rumson's one of those blocks.
That's correct. And what they did, and you can see it very consistently in the layout of this plan, they respected the parkway. They took 90 feet of property for all the parkway frontage lots to create those estate-style lots.
And that remained consistent all the way down the parkway was 90. That didn't shuffle, but what it did was create the inconsistency in the back lots.
Correct. So the remaining property between Winchester Avenue and the back of those parkway lots, they divided essentially evenly between the blocks based on the land that they had left. And that's what created a neighborhood with an intention of an average of 50-foot wide, but you have some blocks that dropped below the 50 because of the physical geometry of the land that was available.
So the lots back to back would be the same size, but when you're going across the street, for instance, from Quincy to Rumson, there'd be 50 foot on the say the east side, 48 feet on the west side, the side we're talking about.
Correct, correct. So I'm going to go to the next exhibit, Exhibit A2, because, that's, okay, so that's what's in 1914. That could maybe mean nothing as compared to today, right? So this is an aerial photo that is recent enough that it was taken at about 2 o'clock today. So this is exactly what's there right now.
Really?
Literally, this is what is there if you were to drive by there right now. So what I wanted to do, what I did here is we took a bird's eye aerial view of our block. This is our block, this being the parkway up here on the upper left, and this is Exhibit A2, if I didn't say that already, this being Winchester. If you look at that block, and you look back at the 1914 aerial, but for our property, every other lot in the block has remained exactly the way it was laid out back at that point.
John, and yours-
And not only has the lot remained in existence, it's remained developed in that fashion. You can see 48-foot wide lots with houses on them. Every one of those lots again, but for the 90-footers that are up on the Parkway, our entire block has 48-foot wide lots, except for ours. If, from a distance, if you, from where you're sitting, when you look at that block, our lot is the one that looks out of character. It's the one that looks bigger than the rest, it's a sprawling house, and it looks out of character with, oh, okay.
John, in your experience with other municipalities, what the likelihood of maintaining this consistency of a block like that for almost 100 years is what?
Is very low. And what was also interesting as we looked further, the blocks on either side of us, but for one or two lots, have also remained very consistent. There's some properties on the Parkway where some folks have bought properties going up the street so they could build even larger houses up on the Parkway,
So
but
to exaggerate a little bit, this subdivision would actually be curative. It would actually put this property back the way it should be, the way the rest of the block has been maintained, fortunately.
in our opinion, yes. What this does is this puts that property back at a size, shape, and density that is more consistent with the surrounding buildings and the block specifically. But also keep in mind, even if you go across the avenue, although those lots are slightly wider because they're in a block that was a little bit longer, so they were able to spread those lots out a little
Can I
further.
have to show that?
You can look at the consistency of the development. Those lots are all built the same way as well. I'm sorry.
You really have doors that face doors. It's in a neighborhood type of
Correct,
pattern.
that's correct. That's correct. I'm going to go to Exhibit A3 for a moment. And this goes, takes you in even further to the specific piece of property. This is a portion of the tax map. The red is the subject property. All of the yellow lots in our block that I just spoke about, in fact, actually, all the lots in our block, even the ones that aren't yellow, are the lots that were laid out in 1914. They are the lots that are there today. Our lot obviously was at one point consolidated into one. The properties on either side of us, again, the block immediately adjacent to us on the other side of Rumson has not changed since 1914. There's a couple minor changes on between Sumner and Thurlow. One of them is a church property. I don't know the full disposition of that one. But interestingly enough, behind that, where I will say directly behind us off of Sumner, there was a lot that was consolidated, but that lot was then subdivided, and that lot now has two brand-new single-family homes on it.
It's a
Albeit-
similar subdivision, but for the longer
Yeah.
block because of the Parkway.
Albeit it was a conforming subdivision, I recognize that, but my point being that it's the identical subdivision that we proposed, it's just that the way that this block lays out, it had more land, so those historic lots and existing lots met the current zoning.
In the Parkway section, then, there are other lots that are less than 50 feet wide at this exact location.
Yes,
As you run up the Parkway or down the Parkway.
yes, yeah, as you get further in both directions, when you get to those shorter blocks, they jump down to 47 in some blocks, 48 in some blocks, that's correct.
This is not necessarily, this is actually consistent with the zone plan and zoning ordinance versus inconsistent.
That's correct. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, the yellow lots across Winchester, that's a different zone. Those lots are permitted to be smaller. But I did want to point out, with our request, we're not abutting another zone that has much larger lots that would put us out of character with that zone. All of the lots in yellow are equal to or smaller than, actually they're all smaller than the lots as we proposed them to be at 48 feet wide.
And do you have an exhibit that would show that if improvements were proposed on these lots, how they would line up with other houses on the block?
I do. I just so happen to have that.
And Mr. Barnhart, not to interrupt you, I just want to state that Mr. DiGirolamo has appeared after we began the hearing. So, Joe, you can't participate, vote, ask questions or anything. You're out for this one. Sorry.
You can't ask questions.
No.
Come on.
So this is marked Exhibit A4. This is a straight-on aerial photo of this block. And we took the conceptual architectural plan for two homes and placed it on the specific property. So as I mentioned, you can see the consistency of this neighborhood. You can, our block, the 48-foot lots, every single one of them built on a single-family house. That 95% of them have the elongated front to back with the narrower left to right. What is being proposed is to create a subdivision that eliminates that sprawling house that's on the lot now, creates an additional air, light, and open space corridor that, in our opinion, really benefits the people behind us because it lines that corridor up with their corridor and creates that consistency. But keep in mind, this isn't just our block. Look across the street. From a distance, you really can't tell that those lots are actually conforming versus non-conforming, because we're talking about a 50-foot lot versus a 48-foot lot. When you go across the street in the other direction, there's a tremendous consistency in development pattern, has been for many, many years here.
So with this block, you really can't say that, you know, one larger lot is not necessarily out of character because there are a spattering of different lot sizes. That's not the case here.
No, there are subdivisions that we've worked on before, and this board has had a lot of comment on, that you've got, well, yeah, you've got a couple lots in the area that are the same as yours or
Right, so
similar to
this isn't
yours,
terribly
but,
inconsistent.
right, it's not totally inconsistent, but this is a case where every lot in our 48-foot wide lot block has stayed the same for literally 100 years.
Speak to the density numbers and explain how that works. And Roger mentioned it in his report. The density is not exceeding what is intended and is in fact consistent with
Right.
what's there.
Right, so keeping in mind all of what we just said about the consistency and why we think this is an appropriate subdivision, you gotta step back and look at the specific request and what, in our opinion, how minor it is. When you look at this piece of property, its total area is just shy of 8,000 square feet, which would be the conforming requirement for 2 lots. It's 4% short in lot area, 4%, that's it. With regard to lot width, it's the same thing, it's 4%. You're required to have 50, we have 48. You're required to have a 4,000 square foot lot, we're 160 square feet short per lot.
Can you build
So-
can you build the same house on these lots as you could on a 50-foot lot?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. There's there's no request for any bulk variances with this application. They're proposing to conform to the ordinance in all other regards with regard to setbacks and coverage and height and all the other elements.
Let's go through the positive criteria then quickly. What purposes of the Municipal Land Use Act do you believe this subdivision promotes?
Sure. First and foremost, we believe that this application promotes the general welfare because we believe that what it does is it creates 2 lots that are very much in conformity with the neighborhood. A lot of this size, you have a building on this lot that's an old brick building. It is below the floodplain, so it's gonna require to be renovated, and it's pretty much obsolete. So your options when you go to renovate a building like this, because you're gonna put yourself into the situation where you're considered a substantial improvement, you're either gonna have to elevate the building, or you're gonna have to tear the building down. Elevating a brick building that's sprawled.
Yeah, put that exhibit back up with that rancher on there, yeah?
Sure. Elevating a brick building that's sprawling rancher as this is difficult at best, probably not really even that feasible and probably not cost effective whatsoever. So the answer is tear it down. So what do you have? You have a vacant single lot that's nearly twice the area that's permitted in the zone. What are you gonna get back? Realistically, you're not getting another rancher back. I haven't seen a rancher built in Margate in my whole career. There might be one somewhere, but not that I'm aware of. So you're gonna get a house, in my opinion, a nice big house on this lot. So what we look at from a planning perspective is redeveloping this lot as a single house.
And what we're not doing, we're not giving you a footprint of the proposed.
Right,
house.
we're not getting into the what
Not
could be,
going there
should be,
because-
as far as plans are concerned, but
Thank you.
But this is the reality of it because of what's on the lot right now. As a vacant lot, I really couldn't have this discussion, but we have an existing building that's obsolete in our opinion. So what you're gonna end up with is you're gonna end up with a 2-story house on the lot, probably centered in the lot. What we believe is that by dividing the lot, forcing that air, light, and open space corridor between the houses, and forcing the house size by virtue of the subdivision to be more in character with the surrounding house sizes is what promotes the general welfare.
And you're speaking quietly of the detriment to the people behind.
Yeah, I mean, right
By
now,
allowing one house.
right now, a 2-story house, even if it's, more modestly sized, is essentially gonna be in the middle of the lot, creates more of a negative impact to the neighbors, in my opinion, than if we have 2 smaller homes on the lot.
With that, then go right into the light, air, and open space and the preservation.
Yeah, we believe that this application would actually promote additional air, light, and open space because of the corridor between the 2 homes. You've got some existing nonconformities of the existing building that all go away, and the proposal is to conform to the ordinance with regard to setbacks and coverage.
And what you
with-
spoke to originally was then establishing or maintaining appropriate population densities.
That's what I basically went on and on about at length with regard to appropriate population density. This is exactly that. What we're asking for is very, very appropriate for this specific location, this specific piece of property, because there has been no deviation. If this lot was consolidated once and built a bigger house, and this lot was consolidated, the argument gets really weak. But that's not what we have here. We have an extremely consistent neighborhood.
And finally, obviously, these lots will have to be constructed under the new flood hazard ordinance,
Yes,
so it will help to prevent damage to people or property from flood.
yes, it would.
Okay, how about the negative criteria? Do you think that these variances can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the intent and purposes of the zone plans and ordinance?
With regard to substantial detriment to the public good, again, I believe that this is actually a benefit to this neighborhood and to the public that are specifically affected by it. With regard to substantial detriment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance, your zone plan and zoning ordinance intends for this area to be 50-foot lots. The way that these properties lay out on a block by block basis, they average out to 50-foot lots. Some blocks are 52, some blocks are 48, that averages to 50. We happen to be in one of the shorter blocks of lots that were 48 feet, and we're just proposing to keep what was always there.
And a town that has continuously strived to maintain and limit house size,
Correct.
would this proposal be consistent with the master plan?
It would, because it's it's forcing two houses to be built, wait, let me rephrase that. It's forcing lot sizes that will limit the square footage of houses to be built on them and keep them more in character with the surrounding houses.
And consistent with the zoning ordinance and the bulk criteria of the zoning ordinance?
Correct.
Thank you, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
John, a question.
Yes.
On the proposed two houses that you want to put there, how many bedrooms in each house?
There is no proposed houses.
They showed the two houses.
That was just the concept. I mean, there hasn't been a full design of a house.
No, there's
at this
not,
point,
right?
No.
There's
The
not.
likelihood is, if you all consider it, it would be pursuant to zoning, likely 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms.
4 to 5 bedrooms each. Yeah.
But the parking would have.
I just,
But Parking would be compliant, there'd be no variances associated with that.
I just scratch my head that you think that you present it as it's bad to have a bigger lot in the neighborhood, and you're actually fixing something by subdividing and creating small lots. It just baffles me that you can say that it's a benefit. If you want to go back to 1914 and what the intent was when the master plan was developed in 1914, if those people in 1914 saw the size houses we were building on the lots, then maybe they would have had 16 houses on a block
Why
instead of
hasn't the
20
zoning
houses.
been, why has the zoning been changed to larger lots, than 60 feet?
Because the houses are already built.
Exactly, they've stayed, and they've stayed
Right,
that
and
way
now
for
it's,
100
and now
years.
it's 50 feet, right, and now it's 50 feet, so we shouldn't, or should we go back and say, well, okay, well, this one won't be 50 feet?
But it has-
You use, and in this case, and other cases, you go back to 1914, and it really just doesn't apply.
But it's 1970, it could be 1980, I mean, it hasn't changed, on this block, it hasn't changed in 100 years. I mean, we're just showing you that for 100 years, it has been consistent.
Right, and you
Maintaining
said
that.
the intent of the people in 1914 was to have this many houses on these blocks. Well, when they were building little houses in 1914, maybe that was their intent. We don't have that anymore.
You could say the same thing for the intent in 1970, and the intent in
Yeah,
1980.
okay.
That it hasn't changed, that the
Right.
intent was to maintain that density.
And I feel like in 2025,
In the
you're still gonna
microphone,
have,
please.
you're still gonna have those same size lots.
If
Well, the lot sizes are never going
They're
to
still
change.
gonna
They're
be
already there.
48.
So now we have a legal lot, and you want to make two lots that don't conform to current standards.
Right?
Go ahead, no.
But
That is
no,
correct.
I understand.
I
what you're
just.
saying, but my argument is that.
Your argument baffles me, that's all. That's just,
It
go ahead.
absolutely does not baffle you, it's a sensible argument.
What? Thank you. Okay. It's a sensible argument. Conceded.
Thank you.
Chris, on this exhibit list, there's an A5. Did you get
I
to an
didn't use
A5?
A5.
You
Okay.
can use it as a-
Thank you, Mike.
It was a subdivision plan that was submitted with the application. but
application, okay.
There was no reason for me to use it.
Do you want to address the engineer's report?
I will deal with any additional variances, and any additional waivers directly with the engineer's office as is practice, but otherwise we'll comply. Nothing dramatic that jumps out.
Anybody on the board except Joe have any
And I
questions?
think, Roger, they'd probably just be checklist waivers.
I would say in section A for the review, all those items could be waived without detriment, because we're,
You want to do that?
I have a letter dated March 18th from Mr. Balanson, where it looks like under number A, he's asking for waivers for numbers 2, 3, 6, 9, 10, and 11.
Look at that, I'm ahead of myself.
Want to say it?
You give it to Mr. McLaren, which I think I
Sure.
copied him on. That would be our request, Mr. McLaren. Just make reference to that, Leo, in the record?
Sure.
I would even add some.
You done with that, or are we still?
Yes.
Clem? Microphone, please.
The intent is to put two houses on these. Would they be spec houses, or are they for specific individuals?
Not that that's relevant, but they'd likely be, could be either, one could be for an individual, one could be spec.
I can't hear you, Chris.
It could be either, Clem. I mean, the lots could be pre-sold and they'd be for individuals, or they could be spec homes. You know, that really doesn't matter.
What
But
matters to me.
it should, but, we don't know yet. Hopefully they'll be pre-sold and be for people who design their own houses.
Chris, John also said they were two-story houses. Is that, there's no limit there, is there? It could be three stories.
It could be 2.5 stories, and what he said was, if a single home was built, he said a large two-story home.
Okay, I just want to clarify, he wasn't
I
limiting
heard the
it.
same thing.
You weren't limiting yourself to that, okay. If nothing else from the board, does anyone here from the public like to comment? Please come forward and state your name and be sworn in.
Patterson, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Sansman's principal with JJCC said if that would be a consideration of the boards, 2 habitable floors would be acceptable.
To what?
2 habitable floors would be acceptable.
Oh, I was just asking his.
I'm just
Right,
trying to,
okay,
I'm just trying to get ahead.
okay.
He would accept as a condition of an approval, 2 habitable floors as opposed to 2.5.
If there's no one from the public, is there anyone? Public portion's closed. Any other comments or questions from the board? Would you read the motion, please?
Sure. We have 8 board members without Mr. DiGirolamo, so it's a minor subdivision, so all 8 of you can vote. Someone needs to make a motion for a minor subdivision approval to create 2 lots, and the variances would be on each lot. The lot width would be 48 feet, where 50 feet is required, and on each lot, the lot area would be 3,840 feet, where 4,000 square feet is required. There's also waivers as set forth in Mr. Balancen's letter of March 18th, 2019 that he's requesting. That's number 2, 3, 6, 9, 10, and 11 in the engineering report. To the extent that there's any other of these items and checklist items in the engineering report that need to be addressed, Mr. Balancen will do so with the city engineer, and the applicant will comply with all other conditions in Mr. McLaurin's report and in the engineering reports.
Chris, one of Mr. McLaurin's conditions was that the street trees be preserved. Is that okay?
Street trees, yes,
That they be preserved, the existing street trees?
that's fine.
Okay.
And you're going to demolish before you perfect the subdivision?
Yes.
Okay, someone needs to make that motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Clem Wozzeski,
I'll use this one. It's a shame what's happening to Margate. These oversized houses on undersized lots just goes on and on. The ruination of the town I grew up in. John's arguments are all technically very good, but I don't think we can make our decision just based on the technical aspects of it. There's a certain feeling involved here about the city, which in my humble opinion is going downhill fast as far as the architecture and development is concerned. If you look in our ordinance, it says that 50 foot is the minimum. If you look up the definition of minimum, it's nothing less than. It's very specific. And these proposals do not meet the minimum requirements of the ordinance. So I vote no on the application.
Rich Patterson.
Well, I'll say again, I know it was a good argument or whatever Chris said that I should have said, but I see a neighborhood that's blessed with a bigger lot. And to say it's a good thing that, because all the lots are 48 feet, that it's good, that it's actually helping the neighborhood to subdivide this lot, I just can't grasp that concept. To have a lot that's bigger and a lot that's smaller or whatever is, I just don't see how that's a bad thing. It's not just this case, but I mean, I hear that argument all the time, well, every other house is that way. Well, why should we make the matters worse? Why should we make the town denser? The town's getting more and more crowded, more and more dense, the houses are bigger, and maybe in 1914 it would have been a good thing, I just don't see it being a good thing now. I think it's a much better thing to have a larger lot there with one house, one family instead of two houses, and not make the town as congested as it has been. I think that's keeping with the intent of what the master plan is or should be. I vote no.
Mike Cristaldi.
Back to what Rich said about, there you go. Like I said, in 1914, they had one car. They had one garage. They had one curb cut. Now we got two curb cuts. We've got minimum of 8 bedrooms, lying with 2 more. So we got a really population explosion on that corner. We've got neighbors. I live in the neighborhood. I've been there a long time. We got neighbors in the street screaming at each other about who's parking where and how they're parking. I don't see it to any benefit for Margate to keep subdividing and just doubling up our streets. I vote no.
Margaret Gubernalty.
Guess there's one in every crowd. I think that the subdivision fits in with the neighborhood. I hear what you're saying. I think it fits in with the 48-foot lots. I don't think it matters if it's for speculation or not. It doesn't matter, because someone could speculate and build one house without buildings and a pool. I don't think that matters. I do believe that it creates light for the houses in that neighborhood behind it, that 1 square unit block. I think that no one came out on the other side of Rumson, on the odd side of Rumson, who do have 50-foot lots, did not come to object. I'd rather see, I think it conforms to the neighborhood. I think it maintains the consistency. I think it fits the neighborhood. It limits the square footage of what could be there. I understand that we're talking bedrooms. If they talked about two stories, I think that's even better. I don't think it creates a detriment to the neighborhood. And I vote in favor of it.
Craig Palmisano.
We call this a minor subdivision, but to me, it's not minor. Not by adding another house, like shoehorning houses in here left and right now. We're just doing it all over the place. Just because it's a larger lot, I feel that a nice size house with a nice size swimming pool, maybe a fish pond in the backyard, I think with a lot of greenery, Margate has been noted to not have much pervious ground. We're way up on the top of the list at 91% of impervious grounds. And I think a nice sized lot like that would have a lot of greenery around the house, a swimming pool. Trying to get up and down these streets in the summertime, it's brutal. And adding 10 more bedrooms where there was 3 is not my idea of a good thing for Margate. I don't see it. I vote no on it.
Remy Pelosi.
I agree with the reasons stated by Clem and the other members who voted no. I have to vote no.
Ron Grupo.
I think in keeping with the consistency of our board and our feelings about, shoehorning these houses in here and subdividing these larger lots, I happen to think the larger lots are not a detriment to the city, but an improvement. I know that intersection is crazy in the summertime. I don't live too far from there. I actually avoid going through that area too much if I don't have to, and just on the basis that the lots would not be 50 feet is what the planning board requires, I have to vote no.
Mike Richmond?
I live in a residential neighborhood back on a 400 block, and my neighbors yell at each other sometime about parking, so that's not just for, certain neighborhoods. I think the subdivision fits into the neighborhood pattern. No neighbors came out and objected to it. The houses that will be built there, they'll be two-story houses. They would be less density because of the new setback requirements, so I'm going to vote yes.
The application does not pass 2 to 6.
Thank you.
Next case is Andrew Ozer, 36 West Drive, Block 201.04, Lot 69, in the S25 district, to grant C variance relief for lot coverage, side yard setback to deck landscape coverage, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Board Chairman, board members. My report was originally dated January 30th, 2019, revised January 31st, 2019. In regard to the application of Andrew Ozer, 36 West Drive, Block 201.04, Lot 69, within the S25 Historical District, otherwise known as Marvin Gardens. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to legalize the constructions of decks that did not receive any permits. The side yard deck encroaches into the driveway, making it unusable, and the rear yard deck covers the entire rear yard, which was previously covered with grass. And also an outside shower does not meet the rear yard setback. So some variances are required as outlined below. Page 2 is the schedule for the S25 Historical District. I've identified 4 variances. They are as follows. Side yard setback for the deck, whereas 5 feet is a minimum side yard setback, and 3.48 feet is proposed, which encroaches into the driveway, and I believe it's a shared driveway. Landscape coverage, whereas 35% of the total lot area is required to be landscaped with vegetative surface, and greater than 18% existed, and about 18% is proposed. I give those round numbers because they weren't calculated, because I didn't have a survey from prior conditions. Off-street parking, possible on-street parking spaces, whereas 2 off-street parking are required, and existing and possibly is proposed, basically just 1 space. Outdoor shower setback, whereas 3
Because
foot-
of the deck?
Yes, it goes further back. You can't pull the car into the
Okay.
designated area. The outside shower setback, whereas 3 feet is the required setback from any property line and 0 feet is proposed. It's actually existing. Waivers requested, variance checklist item 1A, copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet. I recommend that waiver be granted. My comments are as follows. Existing driveway width has been reduced to 3.48 feet wide from 9.73 feet. Easements were requested to be shown on the survey and have not been shown. Existing garage exterior dimensions scaled to 9.5 by 19.5. Aerial photos indicate clearly that the rear yard was grass, now covered by deck. The side yard deck was enlarged and encroaches into an existing driveway, making it useless. There is no records of any permits for the side yard deck. The applicant shall provide a copy of the contract showing the size of the deck in the rear. The outside shower was installed without permits also, no drains, and has not been inspected for the plumbing. So they have to provide proofs that the detriments are outweighed by the benefits on this application. That concludes my report. You can see the photos of the deck and the shower in my report. Historical photos from the assessor's office. Yes.
Mr. Goldstein?
Good evening. Eric Goldstein on behalf of the property owners, Andrew and Lynn Ozer. The Ozers are here along with their neighbors with whom they share a driveway. So let's just get it out as to what happened because there's probably some questions as to this rear yard deck being constructed. There's no question that the deck was constructed without permits. It was not the Ozers' understanding, unfortunately at that time, that permits for a deck below 10 inches would have been required. And that's a big important fact, and you'll notice the deck is below 10 inches, because under your ordinance, if the deck is below 10 inches, it can basically be anywhere. So unfortunately for them, they had a contractor who did work. They said the deck is below 10 inches, we can put it anywhere. The deck was placed pretty much over the entire backyard, and at some point, the city determined that that work was performed without permits, which it absolutely was. So in that regard, we are here hat in hand to fall on the sword to say, we're sorry, the Ozers will testify to that. But with regard to the work that has been completed, we're now seeking to legalize that, legalizing it with a fair amount of explanation regarding Mr. McLaren's report. And you will hear testimony that there is in fact the ability of normal-sized car, 2 of them actually, to occupy the driveway. There's an easement with the neighbor who is here to my left, who they very cordial share this driveway back and forth, and they let each other go on each other's property as the case may be. The deck that encroaches into the driveway was historically there from when the Ozers purchased the property. They fixed it up without a permit, but it wasn't brand-new construction. The shower is going, so he's going to concede the shower has to go because it's too close to the rear property line. But this all happened last summer, and since last summer, we've really been trying to figure out a way to legalize what has been built illegally. And the Ozers did something which a lot of people don't normally do. They were very proactive in contacting all of their neighbors to say, we have this deck in the backyard, we know the deck was built without permits, do you have a problem with the deck? Mr. Ozer actually went so far as to send letters to the neighbor directly behind because there was some belief that the shower, which was temporary at the time, was draining water into his property. Neighbor responded to Mr. Ozer and to me saying, I don't have any problem with it at all, I really don't care. So what we're left with now is the legalization of the deck. And Roger points out in his report correctly that there is a fair amount of landscape coverage that was removed from the construction of the deck. Mr. Ozer believed at the time that because the deck was below 10 inches, that that was okay. Clearly, it's not okay, but there's enough parking. Most of the other setbacks are met, although there is a question about the driveway, and you'll hear some testimony that the driveway is not an issue, nor will it ever be an issue, because there is a recorded easement between both property owners.
So can they fit 4 cars back then, 2 each?
Yes. You can fit 2 on yours, right?
2 on the front.
Well, we're going to testify to that. so-
Okay, okay.
Isn't there a bush back there where you can't get past? The bush?
So let's get them sworn in.
Okay,
and take some testimony. So, Mr. and Mrs. Ozer, come up. Mr. Manis is going to swear.
Eric, real quick, I just want to add something that the construction in the planning office and the zoning office allowed them to finish the deck to make it safe by adding handrail and all that. So we felt safety trumped zoning at that time.
So Roger's correct. Last summer, I actually wrote a letter to the construction office, Mr. Galantino, saying, we want to finish for safety purposes, but the fact that it's finished would not work as an estoppel against the city. So we're not here to say, you gave us that permit, we got you. We knew going in that the safety was much more important, and Mr. McLaren and Mr. Galantino worked with us in that regard, and luckily nobody's hurt themselves.
Are you
yes.
talking, you're not talking about the back deck, right? You're talking about the one that
Both.
protrudes into the driveway?
Both,
Both?
yeah.
Why would you need a railing on a 10?
No, the railing was for the side one.
The side deck, right.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't see any.
was the side deck that goes into the driveway, you're saying that was repaired?
Why don't we let them be sworn, Mr. Richmond, because I think they can explain everything fairly well.
Sure.
Each of you just state your name and address for the record, and I'll swear you in together.
Sure. Andrew Ozer,
Lynn Ozer.
36 West Drive, Margate City.
And do you each swear or affirm the your same address, correct? Sorry. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, you heard me testify a little bit for you. You did a bad thing. You did work without permits. There's really no excuse for that anywhere, but especially not in Margate.
So first, on behalf of my wife and I, we'd like to apologize to the city of Margate, to the board, for not following proper protocol.
But they do have some questions about the driveways and the decks.
Right.
So, you bought the property in 2015, correct?
Yes.
August of 15, and the deck, the side deck is the only entrance to the house, besides the back door into the mudroom. That deck, that side deck to the house
Was there.
it was splintered, it's over old bricks from what we were told is at least 50 to 60 years of age. So we removed that decking, replaced it with year-round subsidence deck that can absorb moisture and sun and not fade and be safer.
Okay, so let's just stop there for a second. So when you bought the house, the deck that is the encroachment into the driveway existed, correct?
Absolutely,
Okay.
correct.
And because that deck wasn't in great shape when you purchased the house, you redid the deck, but you didn't expand the deck. That's very important.
We didn't expand the width of the deck into the driveway.
correct.
It's the same exact width to,
Eric, if Roger's saying that's not so. He
No.
has surveys before and after where the deck does extend further into the driveway where it didn't
longer.
before.
Not
it
wider.
became longer, approximately
Longer.
4 feet longer, and then there's a strip, because I have a handicapped mother and sister who visit, I wanted them to have ability to be moved to the first floor during the day and have the ability to walk around the house on the outside. That was also the idea of decking the houses as quickly as possible last summer,
they're
because
in a
they're both
wheelchair.
in walkers.
Well, I'm just saying these two surveys are showing different things. They're showing that it extends further out in this
The width?
No,
No,
it doesn't.
it does not.
as opposed to this one.
No, because if we actually had a picture of this, I don't know the proper name, the fascia underneath on the side, when we had the stop order, I said, let's not spend any more money. We were going to replace that fascia. That fascia is still there. So the width adjacent to the so-called front door of the house has not changed. That fascia is still there underneath. Again, I apologize, that's maybe not the right name.
So just for purposes of, there's a survey that we submitted from Arthur Ponzio Company, which shows the deck 3.48 feet from the property line, which is also on the driveway. That's what we're referring to. That width remained consistent before and after the Ozers bought the property. It's the length of the deck from the front of West Drive towards the back that was increased.
4 foot, 1.5 inches.
Was that increased over concrete, or was that increased over grass?
Concrete.
Yeah, it's a staircase that's covered. Concrete steps are still under that, aren't they? Under the new deck.
There were no concrete steps. They were wooden.
Is there brickwork under that?
Yeah.
There's brickwork that was on
Yeah.
it.
Right, I saw that.
The steps were strictly wood.
get in.
Yeah. they were-
Eric, can you come up here and look at this?
Yes.
Is that, okay?
Sure.
Is any,
I think that was part of his report, too.
Yes.
So this is a survey we're looking at that's, if everyone has Roger's report, we don't need to huddle up here, just looking at
4 feet, 10 inches. This
page
one's
10
3 feet.
of Roger's
6
report.
inches.
this just respectfully,
Well, just explain it to me.
This is Pete Weiss's plan that he put together.
It says it's Coling survey.
Maybe he took it off of the survey.
Right.
But that's from Pete. Pete did the exhibit.
Here, do you-
Okay.
just explain it, just explain it on the record. You have it.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify.
So there's a differentiation between a plan that Pete Weiss prepared, which was at one point attached to an easement, which is not a signed and sealed survey, and then there's the Ponzio survey the numbers are off minimally. The Ponzio survey, which is actually worse for us, we believe is more accurate, is 3.48 feet from the property line. Mr. Weiss has it approximately.
Mr. Colling, it says.
Well, I guess Mr. Weiss took it from the
Right.
Colling survey, has it at a greater distance. So we are using the Ponzio survey just because that's what the Ozers paid for. That's,
But I want them to tell me, and they are telling me, you didn't make it that less distance, it always was that distance.
Absolutely.
That was my question, because
Yeah.
it's showing you made it bigger, you're saying you didn't.
Oh, no.
Got it.
so, Andrew, I need you still. And Mr. Patterson wanted to clarify, you did not, and this is very important, the board's gonna have this question, you did not widen the deck after you purchased the house, correct?
Correct.
You just finished it off with a better material to allow ingress and egress for a wheelchair.
Correct.
Okay. Now, this is also very important, and your neighbor's here as well, she's gonna testify. How many cars can you fit in your driveway, along with the number of cars your neighbor can fit in their driveway?
Four cars, same as before. Two in the rear, in front of each garage, one in front of each garage, and then two from the curtain curb. Same. Nothing
So
changed.
behind each other, not four across.
No.
One, two,
Two.
one, two.
And then the easement allows a car width to go down. That hasn't changed.
Mr. Pat-
How many parking spots are required?
No, you don't, no.
No.
Two for each property. Two for each, so how many
fired.
bedrooms, how many bedrooms is your house?
Our house is 4 bedrooms.
4 bedrooms, 2 spots.
2 spots. So you have a garage, which is a legal parking spot, right?
He's-
You have a garage that's a legal parking spot, right?
Correct,
And then you have the spot in
Correct,
front of it.
correct.
Now, is that a legal sized parking spot?
it is.
Okay.
And then there's one also, Mr. Richmond,
Say it.
towards the street.
Okay, so there's 3 parking spots for each, is there 3 for each house?
Well, the house next door is more of a shed. It's not really, I don't think you can use that
Right.
as a legal spot.
Okay, but this property has a legal garage and 2 other legal parking spots? Is that what
Correct.
you're saying?
But they don't really use the garage, nor do they need it, but it's there.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
I have some photos, which I'd like to mark as Exhibit 1, Mr. Manos, showing a car, I guess it's the Ozer's car, is that your
Yes,
car?
That's my wife's car.
In the parking spot in front of the driveway. Yeah. I'll pass it around through.
How many you got there? Couple? A series of 5 photos showing the car in the driveway. A1.
Craig?
So, with regard to the construction of the, looking at the 2 different ways, the deck that's in the driveway, that expansion was only lengthening it for ease of getting the wheelchair in and out. It wasn't widened. Although the work that was done without a permit, so that's no question. We're not seeking to say that everything was done correctly. It wasn't. But that was done just to get the wheelchair in and out. With regard to the rear deck, that work also not permitted, but being below 10 inches, could be anywhere on the property line, anywhere up to the fence. By your own ordinance, that would not require a variance. What requires the variance is the coverage is too great. So by putting in the decking, your ordinance has that as impervious coverage, and that coverage creates the variance, which is fairly significant because it's not the setbacks. We always talk about setbacks. Where is the deck set back from the property line? If there was enough coverage on the property in other places, that entire backyard, even right up to the property line and everywhere along the property line, could be decked.
Is
So-
there anywhere else in the property they could create grass?
That's for you.
Well, we have grass in the front, we have grass.
No, is there any additional places where you could take cement out and put grass in? We have a picture where there was a grass strip in front that's not there anymore.
Mr. Patterson, what are you referring to? I'm sorry.
But he's saying,
Where's the microphone? Because it's not all being recorded.
I think John Barnhart has it in the back.
John, would you bring it back, please?
Eric, Eric.
Yes.
I kind of, it's hard for me to imagine a car being in front of the garage doors. I took a picture here of the giant bush you have back there. Next to from the driveway, from the front of the driveway to with that bush sticking, that's what I'm talking about. This bush here, would anybody like to see that?
Mr. Palmisano, that bush is actually on the neighbor's property.
Yes, it is.
So that's why they had,
Impede the car going back to the garages. There's the bush in the driveway.
Yeah, the other question, the pictures, Eric, that you passed out, is showing the car parked in the driveway.
correct.
The deck is right next to it, so if you open the door, does your door clear the deck, or does it hit the deck? Because it appears to me like it's gonna hit the deck,
Well, here's
the
the,
passenger side.
if you have a
Open the
passenger,
door to get out.
as Mr. DiGirolamo asked, if you have a passenger in the car when you pull into the driveway, does the passenger have the ability to get out, or is the passenger impeded by the deck?
No, they can get out.
Talking to the mic.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir, they can get out.
It just doesn't appear to be that way with your car in the picture. I mean, you got this much room to get out of the car, it looks like, because you're gonna hit the deck.
You can ask
If
about
it's 10 inches high, that's all, it just looks that way.
I mean, as a neighbor with an easement, out of respect to one another, because they actually have grandchildren, we try never to park a car back there except on the 2 holidays of the year when parking is at a very minimal. Otherwise, there's never a problem getting parking on the street, and it's only the 2 of us, 2 cars for our house and usually 2 cars for them, and that's it. But they have young children, so we try, sometimes we don't even park the cars in the driveway at all, so the children can play with their bikes and whatnot.
Well, that's an important factor, so let's talk about that a little bit. The deck was done and the construction was completed it was finished without being legalized last summer, correct?
Correct.
From that time through now, have you and your wife or your neighbors had any trouble or any issues at all using your driveway for parking?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Can I get back to, in Roger's report on page 8, there's a picture of, with a grass strip in the front coming from the steps. I'm just using that as an example. Is there anywhere on your property you can, my concern is you got rid of all that grass in the back. If you had applied for a permit, you wouldn't have gotten a permit for that. You would have had to come for a variance. It's a big enough backyard, you would have had a deck back there, but my guess is we wouldn't have approved a deck covering the entire backyard. I'm trying to see if there's any, other than making your deck smaller, if there's any other places on your property that you could return to grass.
Well,
I can't remember from being there.
Talking to the mic.
there's a strip adjacent to the parking in the front of the driveway. There's a little bed next to the house that can be made wider in front of the steps. We can make that more of a green space and put maybe walking pavers in or something like that.
Well, it's the green we're concerned about. It's where the water can drain, not necessarily
But,
nicer looking. But
I looked again tonight,
Right.
there's still grass and dirt underneath my deck tonight. I looked tonight when I got here at 5 o'clock.
How do you mow it?
I'm sorry?
Meaning
How do you mow it?
you have grass there, but it's not effectively grass because the deck's on top of it.
How big is the deck?
I'm
In the
sorry?
back, how big is the deck in the back?
It's the width of the property, Mr. Richmond, which is on an angle 52 feet, and it's between 8 and 19 feet, depending on the width of the angle, from the house to the property line, and it extends around to the corner of the house, approximately 12 feet.
May I also add to the board? There was also, when we purchased the house, concrete from the other neighbor's side, wrapping all the way around to the driveway. That was at least, I would say approximately 4 or 5 feet wide.
And that's not there anymore?
No, that's still there.
So how much of, the deck, like, first of all, you got that angle that, I mean, what is that accomplishing? I mean, how much of this deck would you? This is a shower. Oh, that's a shower, but, okay, so that's, what is that deck also there? That's deck, yeah, so, I mean, does anybody know how many square feet you'd have to take off the deck to make it, conforming or close to conforming? Has anybody done that calculation?
I can give you that.
Well, Mr. McLaurin's report, we do believe to be fairly accurate, even though the calculations aren't shown on the survey, and we're fairly substantial over on impervious. So, without knowing the exact number of square feet that would have to be taken out, it's,
Roger's calculating it now.
okay.
Eric, is the contractor here? The guy that built the deck?
Contractor? No.
Who was it?
Looks like you have, it looks like you have 200 feet of deck in the back there. I'm guessing that garage is 20 feet, and it's about the same measurement across. There's about 200 feet in the back there. It's basically useless deck.
Right, that's what I.
That little point in the back that goes along the fence, along the garage, where the shower is that you're taking out. I mean, if you took that out of there, you're losing 200 feet, so that's,
The deck on the,
Other.
right here, this walkway here?
Yes, sir.
Is that new or was that existing?
You talking about on the other side of the
Yeah.
driveway?
This part right here?
That was all concrete.
Well, it's a deck now though, right?
Yes,
Okay. But you're saying underneath there was concrete?
it is all concrete. 100%.
So we'd have to make the deck 600 feet small.
they recover it.
That's what you're saying.
Right,
Right, they comply.
Put tracks on top of old brick roofs.
okay.
39.
Eric, I still want to know who the contractor was.
I think what the,
That's irrelevant.
Mr. Group has a question.
Right.
Well, who's the name of your contractor?
Well, the gentleman who finished it, who did the railing and the side decking is,
you want the one that put the deck down.
Who did the work without the permit is the question.
I don't care.
Who did the work initially?
Without the permit.
right step.
Right Step?
Come on,
Okay.
board, one at a time.
Yes. You're not understanding me. Who did the work without the
Answer the
permit?
question. Who
I
was
don't
your
care who
original
finished it.
contractor?
I want to know who did the work, knowing that they needed a permit and completed the work and put you in this position. I wish the contractor were here.
That was my response.
Yeah, but I wish the contractor were here to speak for himself. So I'm asking you, who was the contractor?
The contractor who finished the work with
No, he doesn't want, who
The one that put the deck down.
Who put the deck down? Who told you that it could be 10 inches without any permits?
that was my decision. I hired the gentleman, Martin, to do it. But I
So it was just a guy?
Well, a handyman that I was.
So it was just a guy?
No, I mean, Martin's got a company, I don't think. I don't know the name of his company. I'll take a look. But maybe it's called Red Step.
I need
He
you to
doesn't know.
speak into a microphone.
He doesn't remember,
before
is the answer.
this is it.
Okay.
I can get you his last name.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize that I don't have it.
Eric, would you consider, and I'm just getting this feel from the board, that you never would have gotten this deck, you probably would have gotten a variance to have a decent-sized deck back there. I don't think you could have done it without a variance, but I think you probably would have gotten one, but this never would have been approved, and I don't know why, because you did it without permits, that we would approve it now, to cut something out of that back triangle and make it, and put some grass back in there.
May we take a minute, Mr. Chairman, and
Absolutely.
discuss? Of course.
You don't have to do that.
No,
I'm
no,
just
I
getting the
understand, but
feeling from the
look,
board, and that's my feeling.
Mr. McLaurin has been fairly informative in this regard, and we know that if we came in for this exact same project, it would have required some significant relief
You'd have
from
to
the board.
subtract 628 feet from the deck to make it conforming, which gets rid of your deck. So we're not
So-
talking about that.
Understood.
Because we're reasonable here, and we would have allowed you to have a deck back there, but for a deck that we wouldn't let you have, to give you permission now, I think is a stretch.
I understand the concept that you can't come in and beg for forgiveness and get something that someone who asks for permission couldn't get.
But don't go to no variance.
Correct.
Come to
So-
some, have a, I was back there today. I mean, you could have a very good-sized deck there and cut out that back triangle and have some vegetation back there.
If we have a minute, that might be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
And instead of a yes or no type thing, you could-
Yeah.
and we could approve that variance if we approve it.
Yeah. Take a quick
Uh,
break. Is that okay?
Yeah, take a 5-minute break.
Board members, I just want to be clear on something.
Board members?
The required vegetative surface is 35% of the lot, which would give us 1,340 square feet required to be grass, shrubs. According to the survey, they have 18.6% of landscape coverage, which equates to 711 feet, about 712, so they're about 628 square feet shy of where they possibly were before. So I just want
They did
to
comply
throw some numbers
before.
at you, just so you know what kind of numbers they're looking at.
You ready?
We are. Thank you,
Can we
Mr.
go
Chair.
back on? Or we're back in session?
So during the break, the Ozers went through their survey, and Mr. McLaren, Chairman, you were nice enough to talk to us a little bit about perhaps making some modifications, knowing that the impervious coverage was so greatly in excess of what's allowed. And the only issue that we really have here is wheelchair accessibility to the side of the property, which now exists. There's an area closer to West Drive, which Mr. Ozer would remove the deck from the back door towards West Drive.
And the concrete,
That would come out in its entirety.
and the concrete.
Correct. You can take the concrete out. Okay?
Well, it would be, we're looking for vegetation. If it's going to be concrete, you might as well leave the deck.
No, I understand.
So that area would be green space. And then Mr. Cristaldi was nice enough, using his construction background, to kind of draw and tee up a deck which goes from the garage to the fence when the pointy section of the deck extends away from West Drive. And that area would either be shrubs or grass. Would it be grass?
Doesn't matter, doesn't matter.
So some greenery in that area.
Vegetative.
Green and brown.
Correct. We would still be over on lot coverage and under on landscape coverage, but, you know, as usual, the board's been pretty good about suggesting potential alternatives, and I think that's what we're willing to submit, although I guess we have to get a revised plan from Mr. Ponzio's office to submit to Mr. Galantino or Mr. McLaren, because right now we just have kind of ink on the plan, which isn't exactly accurate.
Eric,
Yes.
would they mind keeping that even along the back fence there where the neighbor looks?
I don't understand your question.
We left grass there now.
I know, but I mean, if you left that, like when you came across from the garage, you just left it even across the fence there. Whatever that width is at the widest end, it's not gonna be much. It's not gonna be much at all. I think it'll,
I'm not
it's
sure.
gonna make somebody else happy.
I'm not sure I understand.
Eric. He's talking about right in there, that little piece right there.
Oh, yeah, we had already, I'm sorry, Mr. Cristaldi. We had
Okay.
discussed, yes, that's correct.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And then, very good.
And any concrete that's under any decking that's moved. Because we're looking for pervious.
Right, which Rogers
So
is on the
this is going
side
to
of
be
the
teed
house.
off the
No,
garage.
and
So this
where you
area-
take, if there's concrete under that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no concrete there.
Super.
Now, just be advised as well, and Ms. Ozer pointed something out, at some date, they're going to erect a legal fence along that line, which they're going to get permits for, of course. But that will change, just because they've been planning on doing a fence, it's now time to do it. So that's not in any response to what we're doing tonight. It's just something they were planning on doing, but wanted to wait until this was done. So based on Mr. McLaren and Chairman Patterson, Mr. Cristaldi, Mr. Wozleski, it looks like we do have a plan which would remove the impervious from the rear door towards West Drive, and then the strip along the rear property line for 2 feet. I think.
And then does the deck go back as far as the garage and come over?
The only issue with that, we want enough room on that side, Mr. Patterson, to put a door, because the garage door is not so nice, and he wants to be able to take chairs out of the garage without going into the If you saw the picture of the garage door, it's like an older beat-up door. The door to walk in, a regular door would be easier.
A man door, as I like to call it. My pet peeve in any neighborhood is people who leave their garage door open and you see their crap pile all day long.
Well, then have the deck cut at an angle there so there's a space for a door.
So kind of like that. Okay, we can do that, yeah.
Certainly. And there's two windows on the side of the garage, which I plan to keep. so
Could
that
you
I
use the microphone, please?
I'm sorry. There's two windows on the side of the garage.
I'm going to say this, if you resubmit a drawing and we will, from what we've discussed, the deck goes as far as the garage, there can be a triangle there to fit that door, and Roger will approve. It will be up to Roger's discretion, knowing what we've discussed tonight,
Sure.
okay?
One request, because I know this is going to end up going to Mr. Barnhart and then to Mr. Ponzio to draw. Mr. Wozleski showed us a drawing. May I have a copy of that? Because that seemed to be the most accurate one.
Can I see it?
I guess Mr. Wozleski showed it to me. Rich.
Can I see it?
That's what we're gonna do.
I don't care.
They didn't hire you either.
Yeah.
Well,
And then this. Yeah, he doesn't show the side of the house, that's all, but the back is fine.
Okay, fine. So,
Anyway, we've discussed it, we're in agreement, and this guy here will be the final judge of
very
what we
well.
have, okay?
Yep. Thank you for the ability to go back and modify, and the applicant would rest as submitted based upon the condition that it be drawn and given to Mr. McLarnon for final sign-off. And as usual, thank you for your input.
Yes.
Can I consult for one moment?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
That's all. I mean, the rest of it should be done.
Yeah. Mr. Ozer just had commented that he understands that there's work to do, and he might have to get someone to take the concrete out. The deck is easy, but the concrete's going to require a little bit more.
Well, that's that's the building department
Right.
things of
Yeah, how you
enforcing.
do it is how you do it.
Enforcing what you do. Is there any, so are you,
We were ready to rest and submit as presented, Mr. Chair.
any further comment from the board before public comment? Is there anyone here from the public like to comment?
Well, the neighbor.
You need to be.
Just come up, state your name and address.
Robert Chippets, 34 West Drive.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you the driveway sharer?
I'm
or
the
other
driveway
side?
sharer.
Okay.
And just to let everybody know that we have absolutely no problem with this. We have not had any issues with the driveway. Parking in our area does not seem to be too much of a problem. So we can get our cars in there. I think, quite frankly, the work they've done looks very nice. And just wanted to generally say we're in support of what they've done so far, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Public portion is closed. If there's no other comments from the board, could you read the motion, please?
Sure. Does the parking variance go away, Roger? Did we resolve that, or?
I think we're okay with that.
Okay.
Well, the issue I have is that the deck towards the garage encroaches into legal parking space. So if anything, the parking space size would need a variance. If they're using that space in front of that garage, that side deck encroaches into that parking space.
Well, why don't you ask for the variance?
I would like a variance for that, please. But more importantly, I would like the board to understand that with regard to that spot, and again, as Chippets testified to, it's never been a problem to get 4 separate cars.
Would you like the issue to come up later?
No.
But the issue I have, Eric, is it was a fully sized space before this deck was put on.
I'm going
But
to
that was
respectfully
before he
disagree
bought
with
the
that
property.
one. But before he bought the property, it was. When he bought it, the width was the same, but I understand that there's a length of the deck that changed.
Right, I'm talking in the rear, before that deck was put in, extended.
Oh, I see what he's saying. The
That
extended
was
deck
9
is
by
cutting
18.
into it.
You would be able to open the doors,
No
Mr. DiGirolamo
encroachments.
said, I understand.
And now there is an encroachment from that new deck along the side of the house.
Yeah, of course.
The width, is the encroachment of that deck coming out does not exceed where the trim of the garage door is. It's set before the garage door.
But there's a minimum width you have to have no matter where the garage door is, and it infringes on that. So ask for the variance, and give the mic back to your attorney.
So, we had applied for any and all other variances as the board sees fit in the exercise of its discretion. We would also request that the board exercise its discretion and grant a variance for the parking based upon a 4-bedroom house, to have one less spot.
And for the landscape coverage, I ran some numbers. It looks like 25% is about our target.
Okay.
So that's what you're wanting to try to achieve, is 25%.
Sure,
So it's about a 10% variance.
we'll figure it out.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Mr. Irving, how many vehicles do you own?
2.
All right. Anyone
So your
else?
final answer, sir?
Someone needs to make this is a C variance application. Someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following: a side yard setback to the deck of 3.48 feet where 5 feet is required, a variance from the landscape coverage requirement, 35% is required. They're at about 18% now. That number is going to be approximately 25% that they're going to bring it up to. So I'm going to say the variance is for approximately 25%, and that'll be verified when they submit the revised plans, and they'll provide an exact calculation, and that'll be to Mr. McLaren's discretion. The other variances for the off-street parking space, 2 are required. They're deficient on 1 legally sized space. There's also a waiver from the 200-foot map check requirement to be shown on the plans.
That could be granted without any detriment.
Correct. And the conditions will be that the applicant's going to remove that outdoor shower, and the applicant's going to remove portions of the rear deck, portions of the rear and side deck as represented to during the course of the hearing, and will submit a revised drawing or revised plan to be approved by Mr. McLaren based on the testimony that was presented.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Clem Wasleski,
Without going into any detail on the various changes we suggested and the applicants agreed to, I think it's a very reasonable compromise, and I vote in favor.
Rich Patterson,
I also vote in favor based on the concessions that the applicant has made.
Mike Cristaldi,
With the other board members and the concessions, I can't see any problem, and the neighbors in on it. I say yes.
Margaret Gubernalty,
I also agree with the other board members and vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano,
Unfortunate situation, but I vote in favor with the concessions that were made.
Remy Pelosi,
For the reasons stated by the other board members, I vote in favor.
Mike Richmond,
Yeah, with the concessions made by the homeowners, I'm going to vote in favor of the
application passes 7-0.
Next case is Anthony and Emma Pirano, 501 North Claremont Avenue, Block 804.01, Lot 1, in the S40 District, to grant C variance, building coverage, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren?
I'd be pretty darn happy right now if Eric would bring my pen back. Thank you, Board Chairman and Board members. Report is dated March 20th, 2019. The application of Anthony and Emma Pereno, 501 North Claremont Avenue, Block... Thank you. You need one?
What? No, I'm good.
Block 804.01, Lot 1, S40 zone. Again, this is a newer house. They are seeking a variance to add another bedroom. They still comply with parking. But because of the building coverage requirements, not lot coverage, building coverage, they're slightly over the maximum allowed. So they're seeking a variance. And when I say minimal, it's 0.64%. They're over on building coverage. I rejected this plan when it came in for zoning approval based on that fact, and we got them on the planning board for this hearing. So that's the variance they seek. It's, I think it's like 40 square feet, 41.75 square feet. And again, they're not increasing any setbacks, they're not increasing any lot coverage. They're still fully compliant with parking, but they still have to satisfy the criteria for the C2 criteria. That concludes my report.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicants, Anthony and Emma Pereno, who are standing to my right. So in my opinion, this case represents everything that's great about Margate. So there's a good story here.
Could you use the microphone?
Tony and Emma built this beautiful house and added to their family a couple of years ago with a set of twins. Emma is pregnant again with one kid this time. They've got 2 dogs, and that house is not necessarily big enough. So they went to Roger and said, here's what we're planning on doing. We've got this deck that's over the pool. We want to enclose it. Rather than Roger say, I'm just going to swipe this and write it, he said, you got to come to the board. You got to do this. Everything's got to be done 100%. We got plans together really quickly. Tony's architect got everything really in my hands within a couple of days. We got a staff committee to Roger maybe just a few weeks ago, knowing that we had to come and satisfy the board because we do things correctly here. So what do we have with regard to this specific piece of property? We have an existing constructed deck that will remain the exact same size, except that deck will now have a roof and 2 more walls, which will be a nursery. And there's nothing else being done. They maxed out their coverage when they built the house, so now they've got a less than 1%, much less than 1% actually, coverage issue. Even though the actual coverage on the ground isn't being increased, the coverage and the square footage of the house is being increased. No other work is being proposed. There's no other changes being made to the facade. I can represent that the direct next door neighbor, Carl Sensman, who happened to be sitting here tonight, has looked at the plan. He said, I like it. I'm glad they're going to add to their family. And he said I could come before the board and explain on his behalf that he has no objection. You can't see this bedroom from the street. You can't see whether construction will impact on any of the neighbors. And unless the board has any other questions, we believe that this satisfies the purpose of the municipal land use law and the zone plan of the city of Margate. It's a very, very de minimis change, and I suppose that if Mr. McLarnon had the right to have some administrative decision-making authority, but the law doesn't allow that, he could sign off on it and say, you don't need a variance. But we do, and we're here, and the Perenos are going to add to their family and need this room, so we're asking the board to respectfully approve this variance. If you have questions, Tony and Emma are here, but there's really not much more to say.
Well, on the record, though, Maggie said to say hello to Vincent.
Will do.
They can answer anything, but
If there's nothing, can you step aside and we can see if there's any?
I hate
I'm
to be
sorry.
nitpicky. Mr. Perino, I just want to swear you in real quick. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And do you agree with everything your attorney just said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment?
Testimony.
Public portion, what?
No, that's fine, nothing.
Public portion is closed. Would you read a?
Sure, it's just a
variance,
motion,
please?
motion for C variance relief for building coverage, 30% is the permitted maximum, and they're requesting 30.64% to enclose this deck into a bedroom. And there's a couple of waivers, the submission checklist and the submission of a current survey, which are minimal given what.
They could be granted without any detriment.
So someone needs to make that motion.
I'll second it.
Clem Osleski,
It's a shame these folks had to come here for something so minimal. We ought to
I try my best.
come up with some system here where it doesn't have to happen. Don't
right.
start again. My father was a salesman. He always used to tell me, good salesman knows when to stop selling.
Not a good salesman.
I certainly approve.
Thank you.
Rich Patterson,
Same reasons, yes.
Mike Cristaldi,
Same reason, yes.
Margaret Gubernalty,
Well,
Same reason, yes, but now I can put a face with a name. So, sorry you came here, but, yeah, fine.
Craig
Yes.
Palmisano,
It's so minimus, I approve.
Remy Pelosi,
I approve, same reasons.
Mike Richmond.
I approve it.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next case is James Irvin Jr., 12 North Adams Avenue, Block 228, Lot 308, in the multifamily district to grant C variance relief for side yard setbacks, combined side yard setbacks, rear yard setback, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is dated March 20th. This is another application that came in for regular zoning, and I had to reject it.
What are you doing?
It's the application of James Irvin, 12 North Adams Avenue, Block 228, Lot 308. The effective firm elevation is 10, so they're required to have the bottom of the floor located at elevation 13, based on our new flood damage prevention ordinance of last July. This could be considered a hardship variance plus substantial benefit variance. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to elevate and expand an existing single-family structure. The applicant sought zoning approval but was denied due to variances. The site is located within the MF or multifamily zone. The proposed use is single-family, and therefore single-family zoning rules apply as per Schedule B1. So for comparative sake, the S30 zoning requirements are analyzed. Several variances have been identified and are discussed below. Page 2 indicates the zoning chart. The variances are as follows. Rear yard setback, whereas the minimum setback for the S30 residential zone or any residential zone is 20% or 10 feet, whichever is greater, or 27 feet is required, and 15.2 feet exists and is proposed. This is an expansion of a non-conforming setback.
Okay.
Variance number 2, side yard setback on the right side, whereas the minimum setback is 5 feet and 1.75 feet exists and is also proposed. Again, this is an expansion of a non-conforming setback. Side yard setback on the left side, whereas the minimum setback is 5 feet and 1.91 feet is existing and proposed. Again, expansion of a non-conforming setback. Inherently, with the side yard setbacks not complying, typically the combined side yard setbacks don't comply. Whereas the minimum combined side yard setback for a property with a lot width of 25 feet is 10 feet, and 3.66 feet exists and 3.66 feet is proposed. Again, expansion of a non-conforming setback. Landscape coverage, whereas the minimum landscape coverage for any residential zone is 35%, and less than 35% exists and much less than 35% is proposed. It's an expansion of a non-conforming setback. However, I believe that with some modifications to the plans, they could probably comply. Building height, it's a C variance, whereas 30 feet from BFE plus 4 or 9 feet from existing grade is permitted, and 31.12 feet is proposed. Waivers requested, none have been requested. However, one for the area map within 200 feet, which I would recommend being granted with no detriment. My comments are as follows. The rear yard setback requires a variance due to the expansion, as does the side yard setbacks and the combined side yard setbacks. Again, state law allows any house to be lifted from BFE plus 3 with nonconformities. If you go higher than that, you're required to have variances. That's why they're here today. The proposed addition is a variance-free except for the new roof. The side yard setback could even be revised to allow the minimum setback to be 8 feet as opposed to the 8 feet shown, or at dimension, it's 5 feet, I think. The 8 feet is required for the MF zoning, however, this property must follow single-family development regulations, which allows for closer setback. So what I'm saying is you can actually expand that setback closer to the property line at one location where your addition is. The front yard landscape and the total landscape requirements are not being met as an existing condition and nor as a proposed condition. The calculations are not shown and shall be revised as such. However, the minimum landscape area requirements could be met and eliminate this variance rather easily. Building height exceeds the permissible height by 14 inches. This is likely due to a deep web depth in the floor trusses, and the roof pitch exceeds the minimum required of 5 on 12, as 7 on 12 is proposed. The roof height variance could possibly be eliminated by reducing the roof pitch. I think I ran those calculations, and you probably would comply if you went with the minimum 5 on 12.
Didn't you say they went 30 feet? If they went 30 feet, 512 isn't the roof pitch.
No.
They're at 28 feet?
No, they're at 31.12 feet with a 7 on
Right,
12.
when we raised it from 28 to 30, the 512 went away. They had to have the steeper roof pitch.
No, it just had to have the location of the floor for the eave. There is a lack of windows in the south and north elevations and is likely due to the small setbacks and fire code issues and should be considered a zoning issue. The planting strip is not shown and only 15 linear feet is available for one. A variance may be requested, but a strip should be added, however small. Everything else is just general zoning stuff, but that concludes my report at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Manos. Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicant, Mr. James Irvin. With me tonight is Mr. Irvin along with his contractor. Just by way of background, Mr. Irvin did have an architect scheduled to be here this evening. He had a family emergency and is not able to make it, so we're going to put the case on with Mr. Irvin and his contractor and with myself. So to the extent that a question needs to be answered technically, Mr. Irvin's contractor is well-versed and can testify regarding what the work is actually going to entail as the house gets raised. So this is a fairly significant hardship case for two reasons, as Mr. McLaren points out. Number one, you have a very narrow lot. It's exceptionally narrow and deep. Number two, as Mr. Wozleski says, the gift from Sandy, this house was damaged substantially during Superstorm Sandy, and the goal now is to raise it, get it out of harm's way, and fix it up as much as possible. This house is not a spec house. It's going to be maintained by Mr. Irvin. He simply wants to have a house he can live in, which doesn't have a flood damage first level, and that he can raise and have a little additional space. We do need several variances, all of which are existing nonconformities. The nonconformity is being expanded, and the height variance is due to, as the board pointed out, the change in roof pitch, only because even though we're at the ability to go to 30 feet over base flood, the slight addition to the roof pitch, I think we're on 712, is just to give a little bit more headroom up on that extra level. Having said that, Mr. Irvin is going to testify next. Mr. Manos, I suspect you want him to be sworn in.
Sure, Mr. Irvin, just state your name and address for the record, and I'll swear you in.
James Irvin, 12 North Adams Avenue, Margate, New Jersey.
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Mr. Irvin, you're obviously here for the part of the meeting where Mr. McLaren read his report, and you've been dealing with Mr. McLaren for quite some time. So why don't you walk us through the house itself, the plan that you intend on engaging in to raise it and renovate it, and the fact that you're going to keep the house for your own and not just turn around.
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I'll start off by this. The house has been in my family. My grandfather originally purchased it in the mid-'70s. Since then, he passed. I purchased it from the estate. I had the intentions to keep it in the family, use it as a family house for my kids, my wife, and our extended family relatives as well. What we're looking to do is the house, like Eric said, is extremely damaged, flood damage throughout. It's basically unusable. The house is almost 100 years old. and shows a lot of signs of wear and tear. What we would like to do is bring it up to modern building code, and try to make it as useful as possible for our family to use by adding one extra bedroom and some additional space as well.
So you're going to raise the house up.
Correct. We'd like to,
El-
raise it up so it's not a flood hazard anymore to the community or anything. And like I said, just bring it up to modern building code as best as we can.
So just walk the board through your intention of what work's going to be done and how you're going to renovate the house to the best of your ability.
Right.
Contractors here in case.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm a blue collar worker. Like I said, we've been coming down Margate for a long, long time. I'm trying to stick to a budget for this project, so I'm trying to keep as much existing as I possibly can, while at the same time, renovate the house as well. So what we're gonna do, plan on lifting the house, keeping the first floor as it is, whatever we can save and salvage, structure-wise. The second floor, we would like to square that off to add some additional square foot. And on top of that, add a dormer on the back as a loft for, additional storage room, playroom, possible bedroom up there as well.
And the board is aware of this from Mr. McLaurin's report, but let's put this on the record. The lot that you're currently on is 25 feet wide, correct?
Correct, yes.
And there's no ability to acquire more land on either side?
No, we're stuck where we're at. I felt that by renovating this house, it'd be less of an impact if we knocked it down and did a new construction, which would be probably in the area 16 foot wide and a lot longer and be more invasive to neighbors on both sides and, increase coverage that way, I should say, so.
Okay. And all of the expansions, which are variances now, existing nonconformities, are going to remain the same distances as pointed out in Mr. McLaurin's report, correct?
Correct, yes.
You're not going to make the side yards or any of the other setbacks closer to the property line than they are now, correct?
That's correct, yeah. The structure that's there now, we plan on keeping the same exact footprint as it sits, just a vertical expansion of the structure. No. Well, with the exception of the addition in the front. So,
But that addition in the front doesn't trigger an front yard setback, correct?
correct.
Because the house is set back very substantially from the front of the property line, correct?
Correct.
That just shows a one-story.
Yeah, that's my fault. I designed that. I'm not a landscape architect. I just did that
For the greenery?
for visual, yes, just for landscaping. Yeah, I should clarify, that's not the structure at all.
Yes.
I'm not a landscape architect. I couldn't figure out how to design a house, but that is pretty much a to scale size, and that accurately depicts the landscaping on location.
So let's discuss the height a little bit. We talked about the roof pitch being a 712 versus a 512, and there's a reason for that. Just tell us why you...
Yeah, with that, right now, as on the drawings, the loft area would be 6'8" with the current roof pitch, so by decreasing that, it kind of encroaches a little bit for anyone taller that would be up there, so a 712 will work best in our situation if approved.
And because it's a 712 and the pitch is steeper, it requires a minimal height variance, which is still below 10%, so it's a C variance, not triggering any additional need for a D variance, correct?
Correct.
And you've been proactive in designing this with your architect to try to keep the change to the structure now at a minimum, but obviously by raising it up and raising it to a higher level over the minimum BFE, it requires variances, correct?
Correct.
And you agree with Mr. McLaurin's report that he points out you could raise it to a lower level, but you want to add more space to the house, which is why you're going up a little bit higher.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
All right, I have a question, and before we even raised the height from 28 feet to 30 feet, new houses were being built with a first floor, second floor, and then the third floor with enough headroom. Now here you're going, 31 feet, and there's not enough headroom on a third floor. What am I missing here?
The size of the trusses, they're 18 inches, and that's to create more open concept so we can span the entire first floor without having any load supporting walls.
What's a normal truss?
I mean, I'm not an expert, but 10 to 12 inches.
So
Well, Mr.
12 to 14.
So you got an extra 6 inches?
But those trusses also expand.
Whatever,
Yeah, with the
Mr.
two
Irv-
stories,
Mr.
yeah.
Irvin's
What's the
con-
ceiling height in all the floors?
8 foot.
I just,
Mr. Patterson, Mr. Irvin's contractors here, perhaps he can explain.
Yeah, what do because it's been
Sure.
done on all these other houses, I just don't see.
You could state your name and
Organization.
business address, or
James Lupinetti, One Creation Construction, and 103 Adams Ave, Manchester, New Jersey.
Lubinetti?
I need to be able to
Lupinetti.
hear you.
Oh, this, oh, yeah. Lupinetti.
Okay, I'm sorry. State your address again, I'm sorry.
103 Adams Ave, Manchester, New Jersey, 08051.
Okay, and you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
So you heard the question about the trusses.
Yes.
Explain
The-
why the difference in only having 8-foot ceilings, why we're up so high.
We have places with 9-foot first floor, 8-foot second floor, and they still have a third floor in 30 feet. I don't see
Right.
what the difference is here.
The difference is when you have to put a supporting wall in the middle or offset it,
Uh-huh.
it changes the dynamic of each room. Because we're so narrow, by spanning wall to wall, it allows us to be able to move the walls within the footprint of what we have.
What
So-
allows you?
By spanning the actual floor joists from outside wall to outside wall. So it gives us the ability not to put a bearing wall, say, dead center of the room, which would kill the room itself. Which
What
means
gives
we
you
have.
the ability? Having thicker
The trusses, the size of the
Floor
trusses.
joists. Oh, okay.
Right, so the bigger floor trusses do just that because we're so narrow.
But they only have 8-foot ceilings. I mean, we do this with 9-foot ceilings where they have.
But we're losing almost 6 inches each floor. So each one, so say you
That's why I
have.
was asking, he's making a point.
Okay.
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 I don't get it, but I.
I know, I'll
Can I
explain
ask
it a
one
little
question
easier.
before we go any further?
Yes, sir.
Did you do a board test yet?
Yes.
So you know you gotta put helicals underneath this thing?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the cost of this is gonna be?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
You and me both.
After the report, yeah.
It's, for me, I just.
It would, but
The loan
it,
and yeah.
no, I did. Basically, to take it down, it would be so much safer and a much better process, and honestly save my clients a lot more money. But we don't want to lose the width of it if it's existing conforming. It,
You're a 2x3 on that existing. I know they're old 2x3s.
Microphone.
right.
They're the old 2x3s, but it's still a 2x3. That's all gonna be replaced. You're not gonna get the code with that.
And this is the thing, we don't wanna lift it, but we also, it's worth it to lift it and then just sister what we can, just to keep the width of the house. If the board would approve the actual size of the existing conforming, absolutely, we would take it down and do all new, absolutely. That would be the best bet for us, and honestly safest, because we're
Yeah.
already narrow, we have to work around the curbing, and we have to do the heel coils on top of it. But we're-
Underneath.
Absolutely.
You're gonna have to get piling. You're gonna
So,
have helicals.
no piling, it's helicoils.
Yeah, I know.
And then we have
Helicals.
an on-slab footer, which it would be much, much safer, but if we have to shrink the house, it doesn't work with that size without taking
Unfortunately,
the
it's
the
the-
I
depth
mean,
of it.
we've granted other variances for 25-foot lots.
Yes.
Right.
Because there's an existing house there. You can do
It's just so narrow,
something
Mr.
that's
Custodi, we're
more
really
beneficial
looking,
to you.
as you know,
Yeah.
you got it.
Never mind.
But
we're-
your point's well taken. It's if not for the extreme hardship of the lot, even with a new home, we're still looking at a relatively narrow house. And it's narrow now on a 25-foot wide lot. It would be even narrower with,
It's narrow, but it's narrow, but you have 1'7" on one side of the house. 1.7.
It's tight.
You can barely get back the alleyway with the fence there.
Right.
I went back there, and
It's very tight, yeah.
it,
You have to walk side.
and when you raise the house, on the right-hand side of the house, it's right next door to another building.
How do firefighters get back there?
I don't think you can.
There is access from the rear neighbor's yard, if they did have to pull an emergency vehicle in, or any apparatus.
From the other street?
From Jefferson, yes. Well,
How long's the house been there for?
since about the 1920s.
Right, so.
It's got 2x3 outside walls.
It's always had
Wait,
that.
enough.
I have a question.
Into the microphone, Mike.
Yeah, in the rear, it says remove and replace the existing concrete.
Correct.
So why can't we just take, if you're gonna tear that concrete out anyway, why can't we replace that with grass or grass?
I could, if you prefer grass, we could with the grass, I'm not
yeah, I-
opposed to that.
I think they can accommodate that in the front, though, too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we approve this, you'd have to meet the landscape
We had spoken
requirements
about that,
because
and-
he says you can do it, so you
Yeah,
can do
and
it.
Mr. McLaren's indicated that
good.
it can be met, the applicant will meet it. So
Okay.
if that's a condition.
need to know.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Richmond.
Anything else? Eric?
We're prepared to rest. Look, we understand that this is a project which obviously could be a start from scratch, new construction. The property owner, in his discretion, wants to raise it, so it's not for me to say he shouldn't. It's a project that will only increase existing nonconformities, not add to them. And with regard to the height, the benefit is you're going to have a bigger truss, but it's not for any other reason than to shore up the property as best we can. As we testified, ceiling heights not in excess of 8 feet on any of the floors. So this isn't the typical case where you see a height variance because someone wants to have a nicer, higher ceiling on at least 2 of 3 floors. It's really just to make sure that it's as safe as possible with a thicker truss. Aside from that, there's not much more to add. We'll have the applicant and his contractor here to answer questions if there's any additional as the board considers this.
You're replacing everything. Joists, sidewalls, everything. Ceiling joists, roof rafters,
We are, yes.
that's the whole building.
No,
What happens if this
We're not
building?
replacing everything. You're keeping the first floor. What are you doing with the first?
They're raising.
We are raising it, yes.
There's
You're
two by,
raising it, and you're raising the floor joists that are underneath, they're being raised, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're,
now
they're
you're gonna
all,
probably have to repair some, but you're not, yeah.
they got
Now
2
you-
by 3 walls, it's house is 100 years old, 2 by 3 outside walls.
Right.
But they're gonna have to comply with.
What happens?
I mean,
Yeah,
look,
we
here's
have
the
to-
deal. We're not here to talk about building and costs and all that stuff.
I
We're
know,
here
I'm
to
not
talk
talking about cost.
a variance.
What happens if it falls down when they're doing?
Then they got an issue.
Then that's right.
But respectfully,
That-
Mr.
that, you know,
Palmisano,
I
I
don't-
think
I
that's.
don't-
One
more
at a
of
time,
construction
one
issue.
at a time.
You know, I'm not worried about if it's gonna fall down. If it's gonna fall down, then they're gonna have a problem.
And respectfully, Mr. Palmisano, that is a construction issue. Mr. Galantino's going to have to sign off on it. You know, the fact that the applicant wants to keep it and feels like they can make it safe, they'll have to meet code. So at some point, Mr. Galantino will get plans and will say this does or does not meet code.
Okay. Larry, you say you're not increasing any non-conformities, but when you add more volume closer to the setbacks that require setbacks, you are increasing.
We have a vertical nonconformity increasing, but it's not going outside of the existing footprint. As you always see, someone wants to add a bump out here, a bump out there. The footprint remains the same, it just goes higher.
I see the biggest issue is fire access.
But again, respectfully, it's the same fire access that exists now.
There's a hazard there right now. And you're not helping that much.
Is this not something for the building inspector?
Can we speak into the microphone?
Is that an issue for the building inspector?
That's something we can consider.
Excuse me.
We're allowed to consider public safety issues.
Ron?
But it's the same building. They're not making it wider. Yeah, they're putting it up. What are the options
The
here
building
for them?
department doesn't do zoning.
Right,
We don't-
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're talking about fire access.
Our point is the access isn't going to be any different
It's not gonna be,
On the 19th one.
Both
than it
walls
is
do
now.
have to be rated, but that's none of our business.
Okay. Anything else from the board?
I just have a question, Mr. Irvin. The opposition to demolishing the whole thing and rebuilding it is you don't want to lose the non-conforming width? Is that what I'm understanding?
It was the width and also my budget as well. New construction would be out of my budget to completely tear.
Well, your builder just said it's cheaper.
For the type of loan I got, this is what I'm stuck. I can only do a renovation on the property.
Okay.
If I could knock it down, I absolutely would, but this is my best option right now, to have a house in Margate, you know, for my family and myself, so.
Thank you.
Anyone, can we go to the public?
I just have one thing to wrap up with, which is, we've talked a lot about the construction and the type of ingress and egress for emergency personnel, whether or not the construction itself is going to work. This really is a hardship case based upon the size of the lot. I don't want to lose track of the issues here with the hardship. It's narrow and flooded, which really is not a double hardship, but it's cumulative, that the flooding is only going to be alleviated and purposes of zoning served by raising it up. And the hardship of having a 25-foot wide lot based upon your zoning is fairly extreme. So based upon not expanding outside of the existing footprint and just going up, we think that the project satisfies the purposes of the municipal land use law.
Thank you. You okay?
Yeah.
Anyone from the public here? Please come up and state your name.
You can go one at a time.
Well, we're husband and wife, so we can.
Are you
Okay.
sure?
36 years as
Well,
of Monday.
state your name and address,
and then
I'll swear you in.
Okay, hi, Barbara Silver, 14 North Adams Avenue. We're the ones that have the property that's a foot and a half over.
Stephen
next
Silver,
to it.
14 North Adams.
And do you guys do each swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Just one at a time, speak as best as possible.
Okay, well, we are really upset about this. We've been dealing with this property since Hurricane Sandy, and we got flooded too. We took 3 feet of water, 3 to 4 feet of water through our whole property. And we're a 4-unit complex. And so we've gone through hell. They did own property next to us, which was sold to Fishers, and they built this beautiful property. And now we have a fence from the beginning of our property all the way back, which allows us about 3.5 feet of entrance into our whole property. We have a
2
main
feet,
door.
2 feet.
3 feet on the right side. Where Fisher built on the right side, which is 16 North Adams Avenue, we're 14 North Adams. So Nick Siamba and his family, including the grandson, owned the property there. They sold it. They also own the property next to us, next to that property, so they do have property to come to the shore. This property was offered for sale. We offered them some money to buy it at one point so that, we were going to make it green space. And then they decided not to, so they sold it to the grandson, which is fine. My issue is, since the hurricane, nothing's been done, except this past summer, when they've been, putting tractors in there and stuff and empty things and emptying out the house and all this stuff from the hurricane as we're having a barbecue and I have my grandchildren and my 88-year-old father-in-law in the bottom one-bedroom unit, which is 300 square feet. And we have all this stuff from this tear, they're doing this work. And we kept going to Roger, are there permits? What's going on? What's happening? It was so upsetting. So then we had a ladder go up next to it. Now our house is 1.5 feet away from this property. They're 1.5 feet next to one another. Yes. Let me, we have a picture.
rear house.
We took a picture we have our front house, which we just raised because we got hit by the hurricane, and we also didn't have parking. So Roger, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, Roger, our architect, we raised our house this past year. Took us almost 1.5 years to raise it, and we did the helicon pilot. And we put a garage in because of all the new homes that are built on Adams Avenue. There's less parking because the homes that are built now have a garage, so there's more curb cuts along the whole street. We've lost almost 10 parking spots on the street. So we had to raise the house, we needed the parking, and we only have, these are all non-conforming lots. We're so scared now because this back unit that they have, their house is 1.5 feet from our duplex. We have a bottom unit, top unit. Bottom unit is right now with a school teacher that teaches here at Atlantic City High School and her 4-year-old daughter. The top one is a couple that uses this for the weekend. And we have the front house, and there's a 1-bedroom apartment attached to the back of our house, which we also use, our grandchildren use. So by them doing this, I'm so concerned. We just spent all this money raising the house. 1.5 feet away, how are you going to be drilling down helical pylons? It's not going to ruin our foundation back there now. When Fisher built the house next door, we had problems. On that side, we had to fill in concrete on the foundation of that. I'm so upset about what's happening. I was told it was gonna be torn down and they would have to build a narrow house conforming with the new setbacks. I mean, I can't imagine. Right now, they put this, all summer long, they put this orangey fence, like just tacked it in, and we had stuff coming all over our property as they're tearing down this stuff. Now, just recently, in the last few weeks, they took it all the way back to our property. We can't even get to, our neighbors can't, our tenants can't even get to their bicycles now. This all just happened in the last, few weeks. And we've shared that alleyway back there, their trash cans and our trash cans, and we would come back through that alleyway. We did the new concrete when we just did the stairs and did all the zoning in the last year and a half. So I am really upset. This is like a scary project for me, all the way around, for safety. This past year, we had ladders.
Quick question.
Almost fell. We had,
That fence is on his property, correct?
I don't know whether it is.
It's on his property.
I don't know that because we just
I
found
do.
out about
It's on
this.
his property.
Well, you say that, but if you look at the picture,
Your building is up to the property line.
listen, I'm going to show you
Okay.
this picture. We have taken care of this property now since we bought it from the family, 2005. And here's our backyard. There's a fence there, and there's a part of a little fence in the back where our shed is, and there's bicycles for our neighbors upstairs. This new thing that's put in, and we've been taking care of this now since 2005. It goes all the way, like about 1.5 feet over now. And that was also, we've been taking care of that now since we bought the property in 2005. So this has all happened in the last, we didn't have chance. We've asked an attorney to come. We just got notice last Wednesday. So we live in Florida. We flew in on Monday, and we couldn't get somebody here on this late notice. So we're really trying to figure this out. If you're going to allow them to raise that house, there's only a couple feet there. We are concerned. I thought it was going to be torn down. They'd build a 16-foot wide house so that it would be fitting all the new.
The house that you raised
Yes.
is about 1.5 feet off the property line, too.
We just,
Correct?
correct.
Okay.
That was our foundation, though. That's where our,
It's their foundation, too.
Right, we bought an existing house that was non-conforming, we didn't know at the time. And
here-
they're butted up.
They're in
on
the same
top of each
situation
other.
that you were in.
We're not against, we want them to beautify
we
their
want
house.
it to finally be fixed
We're-
up.
That's why they're here.
Right, but our fear is that if they build up, the upstairs unit, God forbid there's a fire anywhere, they won't be able to get out. Because now,
The staircase is
if
right
they
next to
run
it.
down, if they come down the stairs, if they can, great, but they only can go to the left, because now there's gonna be a fence on the right-hand side that comes right up against our line, which gives us maybe 12 inches.
And the other thing is, we get flooding.
Because of your nonconformity.
But what I'm trying to,
Correct.
and it's also a flooding issue.
We know what
It's also a flooding issue. When it rains, it pours, we get water up to our first step, even today. If you have a flood.
Yeah, but they're gonna have to abide by the landscaping.
everybody, wait a minute.
No, I just want to.
Stop.
Explaining.
Everybody. Speak to the variances. They may have been lousy neighbors, they may be lousy neighbors in the
Oh, they're
future.
not.
About
No.
It isn't about that. It isn't about their trash, it isn't about, speak to the variances that they're seeking. Do you object to the variance, which is going to expand the nonconformance of its 1.5 feet?
Yeah.
Because it's too close to your house?
Yes.
Everything else doesn't mean anything.
Well,
So
but
we-
all the variances, you say, and others, we don't know what the others are. It's
Well,
pretty
you heard,
vague.
that if there's not others, it's anything that was discussed tonight. In the announcement, in the
Legal ad.
average, in the legal ad, it says, and others. Well, they would be discussed tonight. Well, you've heard everything tonight. I'm not trying to argue with you, but let's stick to the point here. You object to it, you've said your point, but whether they're clean or dirty or anything has
No,
nothing to do with
nothing.
this.
It wasn't about clean or dirty. It's a fire hazard for them to go up because the buildings are so close together.
Right, okay.
That's-
So you object to the variance,
That
okay,
is a concern.
okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? When you raised your house, did you put another floor on it?
No.
Stop that, Mike.
We just
Okay.
raised it.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to say? Any other member of the public? Okay, thank you.
necessary.
Board have anything else to say? Any other questions?
Any more public?
Hmm?
Any more public?
I did. The public portion's closed.
There seems to be a person who is on track.
I asked if anyone else has something to say. If you do, come up now. Public portion's closed. Would you please read the variance?
Am I correct, Eric, before, the landscape coverage variance is going to go away?
Correct.
You're going to comply with that? And you're okay with everything in Mr. McLaren's report?
Yes.
All right. The motion is for C variance, someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following. A rear yard setback of 15.2 feet where 27 feet is required based on the calculation set forth in our ordinance. A side yard setback on the right side of 1.75 feet where 5 feet is required. A side yard setback on the left side of 1.91 feet where 5 feet is required. Combined side yard setback variance of 3.66 feet where 10 feet is required, and a building height variance of 31.12 feet where 30 feet's the permitted maximum. There's also this waiver from an area map from the applicant supplying an area map within 200 feet, and the conditions will be that all those set forth in Mr. McLaren's report of March 20th, 2019, and the applicant will comply with any representations it made during the course of the hearing.
They need street trees?
There's only one space.
One street tree? I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Clem Osleski,
Well, the variance is requested notwithstanding. To me, that's just, the proposal makes no sense at all. We've got a lot of 25-foot lots in town, and we've allowed variances for 3-foot side yards, which would give 19-foot houses. And they can be pretty interesting. That's not the issue here. And my over 60 years in the construction industry leaves no doubt in my mind that a new project could be built for at least the same amount of money as this project proposes, or even less. However, all that may not be pertinent to the variances. However, I think these side yards certainly are, and have 1.7 and 1.9, I believe, side yards. There's no access for firefighting here, and even though fire-rated walls would be required, it still presents quite a hazard. And public safety is a concern of this board. I think to allow this to be built as proposed would certainly not be at all in the best interests of Margate, and I vote to turn it down.
Rich Patterson,
After Sandy, New Jersey told us that if you want to lift your house to become flood compliant, you don't need variances. You can keep your existing 1 foot, whatever it is. But if you go further than that, then you need variances. And this board has been extremely lenient on granting variances when people have gone above and expanded to some extent. But I think we were lenient, and I don't think this fits in with the spirit of what the board has been doing in the past in granting those variances to extend these small side setbacks up from a house that's approximately 18 feet tall now to a 41-foot tall house, you're basically rebuilding the entire house. Your own contractor has said it would be cheaper and better and safer to build a new house. We don't like small lots in areas with big lots. This is an area where there's small lots. We have absolutely no problem granting variances for 25-foot lots. We've built nice 16-foot houses, or builders have built nice 16-foot houses. 16 to 19 feet, somewhere in there, you can get, you never meet the side yard setback variances, but we can be reasonable with that. I don't think this is reasonable to expand the size of that house with those existing setbacks because the applicant likes the wide house. I think it's a danger to the neighborhood. I think a new house would fit on there. Again, it's not up to us at price, but we've had your expert testify that it's not going to cost you any more to put a new house in there that would suit the neighborhood better. So I vote no on the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I can't agree with the board members any more than what they've just said. It's just, I don't, for the fire hazard, it really sets me off. I mean, and the cost, I know that has nothing to do with us. But I mean, even your fire rated glass, fire rating the walls, I'm just wasting time. I vote no.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I realize this is a hardship for the family and you're trying to build what's best for you and your family. I realize that the footprint is the same as it currently is for yourself and for the neighbors, and they still have that. I'm concerned as well for the safety, and I know that, you know, even if you have children or whatever, there is a concern, and I know that we'll work with you, you know, to put something there that I think is in spirit of what we want you to do and raise your house and enjoy it. But I have to vote no as well.
Craig Palmisano?
I'm also in agreement with the other board members. What you're trying to do is save the footprint, and the 1 foot 9 inches on the one side of the house and 1 foot 11 on the other. I was a firefighter in Atlantic City. To me, I can't vote for this. I vote no.
Remy Pelosi?
I'll vote in agreement with the other members.
Mike Richmond?
I think that if, well, you know, it's a tough call. I mean,
Your mic on?
yeah, I guess it is. Because basically, we're, you know, they're going to be restricted to how much they can improve the property, so we're basically saying that, you know, you're done.
Would I still be allowed to raise what's there, renovate it as is, and call it a day?
Well, let's
Well,
finish.
no, because when you, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, because if you, how many feet do you have to raise it to bring it to the correct flood elevation?
They want a garage, you couldn't get a garage on that.
I don't mind a little bit. We're in the middle of vote,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
it's okay. Your counsel's much smarter than
We are.
than me anyway, so he can explain it to
How
you.
about that?
Go ahead, finish your vote.
Okay. I think that if you were just raising the house without doing the additions, I'd probably be okay with it, but since you're like, it's exacerbating the situation by putting the additions the same width as the existing non-conforming, I'm gonna have to.
Okay, the application fails, 0-7.
Next case is 301 North Pembroke Avenue, LLC. 301 North Pembroke Avenue, Block 616, Lot 28, in the S40 Waterfront District to grant a subdivision and C variance for lot frontage and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. The report is based on the application of 301 North Pembroke Avenue LLC. located at the same address as ALC. Block 616, Lot 28 is the address that applied. It's in the new S40 WF zone and also partially in the riparian R zone. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to re-subdivide 3 existing lots into 2 proposed lots. This would enlarge the 2 remaining lots by demolishing an existing structure and moving a lot line. A few variances are being created due to the geometry changes and are addressed below. And I included in my zoning schedule on page 1 and 2, documents reviewed to provide the analysis. Basically, the only variance they need is lot width or frontage for proposed Lot A on Pembroke Avenue. They're required to come to the board because it's a non-by right subdivision. And again, because it's a subdivision, it's heavy on the engineer's report. But I just want to point out they're going from 3 lots to 2 lots, so odd area is not a problem. It's just some of the geometry issues with the lots. My comments are as follows. The engineer's report and any comments shall be included in any approval. The minimum width or frontage for the newly created lot, frontage of Lot B along Pembroke Avenue does not meet the minimum required frontage. And it's also not a corner lot, but it does have frontage. The improvements will be required to be demolished prior to the filing of the subdivision. No improvements are proposed and no other bulk variances are being requested at this time. Any deed restrictions and all covenants, easements shall be submitted and noted on the plans. Setback lines and building envelopes are not shown on the proposed minor subdivision plan and should possibly be shown on that, particularly along the newly created leg of Lot B. My comment for future development within Lot B will need to be addressed. Lot B along Pembroke Avenue shall be subject to any front yard setback requirements and shall be considered a front yard. The lines perpendicular to Pembroke Avenue shall be considered side yards and subject to those minimum setbacks until where they intersect the rear lot line and bulkhead lines and side lot line from Amherst Avenue. A little bit complicated for the setbacks. The subdivision must comply with map filing law requirements as mentioned in the engineer's report. I think the board should be concerned about any improvements located in that undersized portion of Pembroke Avenue. I would suggest that any condition of approval mention that and possibly deed restrict any permanent structure in there other than an accessory structure. That concludes my report at this time.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight is John Barnhart. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview because people hear
Could the board be quiet while the attorney's talking, please?
Still have some people here. I'm sure they're concerned. They heard the word subdivision and everyone gets nuts. Got a lot of calls from people and they said, what are you doing here? You can put 3, 4, 5 houses. This is actually what's great about Margate. Going from 3 houses to 2 houses with a deed restriction that nothing will ever be built on the new leg that fronts Pembroke Avenue. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to John Barnhart. He's my expert for this evening. He'll walk us through the exact geometry, but everyone keep in mind, a house will never be built on this lot unless somehow they obtain the 50-foot wide frontage in the future.
So the 2 neighbors are buying it to create open space and they're splitting the space up?
The 2 neighbors have purchased it. They're going to cut the lot down the middle. We're going to call it the Edelstein lot, which fronts Amherst, is picking up the leg onto Pembroke. The Gubernick lot, which fronts Pembroke, is just going to add a portion of its lot to their house for yards or pools.
So
or
we're
anything.
creating more green space?
We're creating more green space, more open space. There's going to be more view from the Tarnapple house down Orient Canal. Mel was here earlier. He left. He said, now that I've seen the plan, I don't need to stay for the meeting. But I told him I'd call him tomorrow and represent that he was here. But he's going to have a better view through. Anybody on the other side of Pembroke could have a view of the canal. Mr. Barnhart was sworn in previously, but I know he has to be sworn in again for this application, and we'll be brief and just walk through the justifications for the subdivision.
Sure. Mr. Barnhart, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And that's John Barnhart, engineer and planner for the record.
Thank you.
All right, John, you know this file well. I've explained it. We've been over this a million times. So just explain to the board in a professional, from a professional planner's perspective and a professional engineer, what we're doing and why this meets more than the municipal land use law, but rather the zone plan's purpose of the city of Margate, and why this is just an awesome application in and of itself.
Sure. So this is an interesting one, but maybe the first one I've done in 25 years of coming before this board. And to use Rich's words, this one actually baffled me a little bit because we're actually eliminating a lagoon front lot. That's what we're doing here, which is a nice thing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Which is a nice thing, right? So the proposed one, I tried to do it with some color just because when you look at the plan, it does appear a bit confusing. But the proposal is to eliminate the existing lot 28 and to reapportion areas of that lot to the two adjacent lots. So what does it do for those two homeowners? Why did they decide to do this? They decided to do it because it gives them more open space, it gives them a yard, and it also gives each one of them better water access. As I'm sure everybody's aware, the corners of lagoons are problematic. I mean, there's arguments and whatever. This helps all of those situations. So just to quickly run through it, the green line is the overall track between all three of the parcels. The red lines are the existing property lines that create this lot, and this lot. The red lines will go away, and the yellow highlighted line becomes the new property line. So Lot B is this dogleg shape that will have frontage on Amherst and Pembroke, and Lot A is I'll say, relatively rectangular lot, which gains a little bit of water access and also a little bit of land area.
Where's the lot division on the water?
It's right here, comes right into here. So the
Oh, I see,
The
okay.
bulkhead line's back in here. So why are we here? Why is this not an administrative approval? It's not an administrative approval because we are technically creating a lot width on Pembroke Avenue that is non-conforming to the zone. That's the variance. That's the only reason we're here, or this would have been an administratively approved subdivision. So what's the justification? I think they're pretty clear. I mean, we're eliminating a building on the water, on the lagoon. We're opening up air, light, and open space corridors. We're improving upon lot coverage. I could go on and on. This is in my opinion, a pretty simple C variance to justify where the benefits of the deviation substantially outweigh any of the potential detriments. And from the negative side, there is certainly no negative impact to the zone plan because we are improving on lot sizes and eliminating a lot, and there is certainly no negative impact on the public good for that same reason.
Mr. Barnhart, you're aware that Mr. McLaurin and I have discussed this matter at length, and that a restriction will be placed upon the Pembroke side of the property that no permanent structure will be erected unless it meets with the requirement of the zone, or at some future date, one of the structures was torn down and they do a lot line adjustment. So it's not as if any member of the public should be concerned that a house is going to be built fronting Pembroke.
I think the terminology was habitable.
Correct.
There could be a
pool or...
You could have a
structure
pool
built
or
there.
shed.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But
But
no...
yes, I
You
understand.
you can't really put a pickleball court there, could you?
That's the Edelstein lot. We can talk to them. The Gubernak's lot, you can't.
Don't you like your wife?
I mean, people complain about the pickleball court. I mean, could they put a volleyball court there?
I guess it's not a permanent structure. They could probably put something like
They
that.
could put anything they want there, really.
They just
As long
couldn't
as
put
it
a
meets
house
your
to live
zoning,
in it.
yeah.
Hopefully it'll be a pool.
Probably a pool, but they have really no plans right now. They just want the additional space.
We've seen some weird things, but
We've heard some, too.
people tell us a lot of things, and then something else happens there. You know? That's all I'm saying.
You're,
Now that that's cleared up.
Mr. Palmisano, the same concept that you've got is the concept that we received when people got our notices. What are you doing? How many lots are you squeezing in? None. There's nothing going to get built there. They said, fine, that's great.
Well, when these lots were created in 1914, shouldn't it be better that you put a house there?
It would be a small
Potentially.
house.
I didn't study that specific issue on this specific
Okay, well,
piece
I'll
of
pay, I
property.
withdraw the question.
But that's it. There's no proposal to build a house there now or in the future. It's literally getting rid of a house and opening up the space and turning 3 lots into 2.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? Please come forward and state your name.
No. It's to be
Joanne
eliminated.
Kenny. I live at 302 North Pembroke Avenue.
Be sworn in.
You swear affirm the
okay.
testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes. I live at 302 North Pembroke Avenue, directly across from them, and I 100% agree with this. I probably have one of the only properties that have more ground than anybody else in the neighborhood. So seeing an open piece, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public portion's closed. Nothing further from the board. Would you please read the motion?
Sure. Just real quick, I didn't see an engineering report. Is there one of
Yes.
anything significant in there that we need to?
Again, most of these are waivable items. I mean, they're not creating
It's
anything.
in your agenda.
Okay. I don't know where that is, though.
And for the plan to be filed, they have to have a fileable plan.
Friedenberg, was in the 70s.
Okay.
No, not the one in the middle.
Eric, you need those waivers in the engineering report that are identified, to the extent you can't comply with them.
Yeah, well, I'm fine with that, thank you.
And you're going to do a deed restriction?
Whatever the board requires, they want to record the resolution, do a deed restriction, I don't care. And then Mr. Edelstein, whose lot it is fine with that, so.
Board? Deed restriction?
Restricted from what?
You're okay with the deed restriction? No.
I wouldn't prefer it, but it's something that they would do as a condition.
No habitable space, like, no.
Well, could they put habitable space there without a variance?
They couldn't put a structure, it would have to be an accessory structure, and an accessory structure per your ordinance doesn't have the ability to live in it. Could be a shed or a pool house or a garage, but you couldn't live in it.
Yeah, so why do we?
I don't see why we need a D variance.
Then, that's fine.
They're hard to
Can we,
enforce.
nope.
All right, well, let's just make it a condition,
Fine.
given the lot width, and you can't put anything habitable there anyway.
That's correct.
So,
Right.
Would you rather have one?
We could
You
record
can't-
the
You can't put a
resolution.
separate principal structure on there anyway. You would have to connect it to that, and they would have to come in front of, to me. And I don't think it's really needed.
Okay.
all right. It's a motion for, it's a minor subdivision approval, but we're not obviously creating lots, it's more of a lot line adjustment. You know what, before I get there, that house is being demolished, correct?
Correct.
Do you have time to do that before?
We do. It's
for
in
correct
fi-
subdivision?
So, Mr. Edelstein has the demo contractor lined up pending tonight's hearing. We have to go to the county as well, of course, but Mr. McLaurin and I assume would hold the Mylar until the house is down, then we would get to file it.
Okay, so it's a minor subdivision approval, which creates a lot with variance on proposed Lot B along Pembroke Avenue of 27.78 feet where 50 feet is required. There'll be waivers for anything in the engineering report to the extent that I'll just put the applicant will work with the city engineer to address those items. And the conditions would be that no habitable structure shall be placed along that Pembroke Avenue frontage unless that frontage obviously becomes compliant in terms of lot width in the future at some point.
So we'll get rid of that curb cut and put the governorship with trees.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
I hear a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Clem Wozleski,
I wish you had more of these. I fully approve.
Rich
Not-
Patterson,
And not to interrupt you, all 9 people can vote.
I approve. Congratulations. Thank you for bringing this case.
Mike Cristaldi,
I'm too confused. I vote yes.
Well, it's just with a pickleball court or without a
Yeah,
pickleball
right.
court?
Margaret Gubernalty,
Very nice, I vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano,
Wonderful, yes.
Remy Pelosi,
Yes.
Joe DiGirolamo,
I vote yes.
Ron Grupo,
I vote yes.
Mike Richmond.
Improvements in the neighborhood, I vote yes.
Application passes 9-0.
Any other business? Roger, anything?
Not at this time.
I hear a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Pete? He made it, and that bald-headed guy seconded it.